No, no surprise. I worry about everything. How are you doing? No, you don't have any. Hey, how's it going, sir? You doing all right? Many hours later. That's the same place. I looked at this. Correct? Yeah. Those two, yeah. 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 He used to work at Here.
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah, this is
This is good. That's right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started a few minutes late today, but thank y'all for being here. I want to welcome Senator Stewart to the Sunset Committee. Yes, sir. Glad to have you on. Sorry you missed the first two, but I suspect Senator Gudger will probably get you up to speed on what happened. Just that. That's his famous last words. So thank you for being here. I want to also remind the members that tomorrow will be, after our hearings, we'll have a lunch break, and that'll be in conference room, LSA conference room downstairs. And then following that lunch, we'll come back in and we'll have an opportunity to discuss and then cast a vote on the three different all the different committees and boards and associations that we've looked at since our July meetings. Also, as a reminder, tonight we're going to have an opportunity to meet and have dinner together at Shashy's at 6 o'clock. So look forward to seeing everyone there. Hope you'll be able to attend. A little bit, it's not on the agenda, but I just wanted to give, we had some members that had some questions about the ABC board, wanted to maybe bring them back in and ask a few questions. We've got Director Stewart, if you want to come up and address the members, and I'll open it up. We've had a conversation, I think an email was sent out to all the members that we gave Mr. Stewart's number out, and I don't know if you had any follow-up conversations from anyone, but thank you for coming back, and thank you for being here today. And members, if you've got any questions for the Director Stewart, now's your time to ask, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer anything that you wanted to.
Well, thank you, Senator Barfoot. And no, I haven't had any calls. I'd welcome any at any time. Not just about this Sunset Committee meeting, but anything else. I'd welcome those calls. I did a handout that I wanted to give to everyone, and I don't know if you've gotten it. I'm famous for a lot of numbers, so if on the very back of it, it's got a lot of numbers. On the very front of it, it's got a smaller schedule with some red numbers. So that's the sheet I sent around to everyone. So hopefully everyone has one. Okay. So if you will, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to make a couple of remarks and then answer any questions.
Sure,
that's okay.
Go right ahead. And members, did y'all get this? Okay, looks like they've been passed out. Go right ahead.
Yeah, it looks like an accountant did it on the back. It's got numbers everywhere, and then it's just got some red numbers on the front. So the red number page, that is the very front of the document. This is just a snapshot of ABC. Now, this is for the last fiscal year, so this is 22. 23 hasn't closed yet, but I've got something about 23 in here. But just to kind of keep in perspective what we're talking about with ABC. First column, our sales, what they were, 702 million. All these amounts are in millions. We had some other revenues, which are fees, licenses, et cetera. So we collected 718 million. We spent $362 million buying the products that we sell, and we spent $85 million running our operations. So that's a $447 million total. So we had $271 million left out of that, and this shows what that consisted of: embedded taxes, amounts specific for the general fund and the district attorneys, ALEA, and the profits that we had that we distributed. So you can see that. And then at the very right column, you see the additional amount we collected on special taxes that we do, 85.8 million, which is beer, wine, the state sales tax, and local taxes. So that's an additional 85 million. So the total we distributed to the state and locals were 354.4 million. And this is in 2022. Okay. So that just gives you that snapshot of ABC. And I wanted to put that on the front because I think that's one of the key pillars of what we try to do. And our mission is to give the money to the state and the locals. That's what we did. Okay. The next thing I wanted to mention is I try to describe it as a three-legged stool. What ABC does is, number one, we protect the public. We make sure that we license, and we're required by law to license everybody who operates with alcohol. And it's important because certain alcohol products appeal to certain consumers, particularly younger novice drinkers. And it's important that we do educational programs and outreach to those. And we reach out to schools, we reach out to law enforcement, and we do a lot of outreach so that people, we have seminars and we train those trainers so that they know how to help people with their alcohol problems. So that protecting the public is one leg of our three-legged stool. Providing the products to the consumers is another thing. And consumers have a wide selection of products in our stores. Some of those products don't move very fast, but we make sure that they're there and available to those responsible adult consumers who want them. But more important to us is that what consumers pay in our stores, we think is less than any place else they would pay for those same products if the state were to get the same money off those products. Of course, you can make consumers pay less if the state received less, but go back to the front, the amount the state received would go down if consumers paid less. And the third thing is the amount the states receive. So that's providing the products at a reasonable cost and still providing the money. And supporting the state finances is the third leg of the stool, and I've already covered how much we give to the state from that. What I tried to do on the next page is anticipate some of the questions that may have been brought up in this committee or by this committee, some of the members. Of course, we did float a request for proposal for a new or a remodeled warehouse to support our operations. So the three questions I thought you may have, and if you have more, by all means, I'll take those too. But number one, why is a change needed? Why do we need to do this? Number two, would it be possible to, say, have three smaller warehouses than to have one big warehouse, say, in the center of the state, which is what we have. We have one warehouse in Montgomery. Could we have, say, a Mobile, a Huntsville, and a Montgomery? Would that work? And the third thing is, could we just remodel where we are or rearrange what we've got and become more efficient where we are? Okay, so number one, why do we need to do this? ABC has grown from about 2 million cases of products in 2013 to 3.8 million in 2022. So we've almost doubled. We haven't closed out 2023 yet, but I'm expecting that we'll be about 3.9 million this year, which is growth of about 3.5% over last year. So that's about what our cases have been growing per year. We think that in 10 or 12 years, we're going to be handling 6 million cases a year. So we can't handle that much. We can't efficiently handle the 3.8 million we're handling now out of our existing facility. Those facilities, we have our main warehouse, we have 3 satellite warehouses right now, and we have a direct delivery store in Montgomery. All of these things are because we don't have enough room in our existing warehouse. And these are things that will be replaced by this new facility if we're able to do this. Another thing that needs to be mentioned is that our material handling system in our warehouse, which moves the product around, it's got a conveyor belt, and it's a smart system that looks at a case and knows where it goes and keeps a record of it so that when it goes on a truck, we know that that particular product went on that truck that was going to that store. That system is at the end of its life, and it's going to need to be replaced, whether we try to do it in the existing place, which I'm told is next to impossible, or whether we try to do it in a new place. The vendor no longer sells this product. They no longer service this product, this material handling system. We just contracted with somebody for 2 years of service on it at an exorbitant price, I think, just to make sure it keeps running. So we're going to have to replace that system, and that system is going to be in the tens of millions of dollars, even if we try to stay in our existing place, maybe $20, $30 million for that. That system breaks quite a bit, and we've got to have people on hand to be there ready to repair it at all times. In addition to the contract, we've got our own employees. So that's the question. Why do we need to do this? I tried to hit an overview without going too deep into it, but I'll be glad to answer any questions. Could we have, instead of a big warehouse, because we're looking at trying to get a 250,000 square foot facility. Right now, we have 140,000 in the main warehouse, and we have over 200,000, about 205,000 when you add in the satellites that we've added. So we're looking to do a 250,000 space. So could we do maybe 3 places, say a North Alabama, South Alabama, and 1 Central, and not have to have a new one? The answer is it would be difficult because we would have to have duplicate inventories in 3 places. We would also have to have duplicate staffs, and we'd have to ship from all 3 places. And you could either have the same inventory duplicated in each place. That means you could maybe ship to North Alabama from the north one, but you'd have to have every product in every warehouse. Or you could say, well, no, we're going to have maybe the vodka and the gin in one place and the bourbon and the scotch in another place. In that case, you'd have to ship all over the state from all 3 warehouses. So you'd have to have duplicate shipping 3 times as much as you have to from this location. So we don't see how having smaller places would work. We're most efficient in one large place centrally located, which is where Montgomery is. Okay? And the third question is, can we rearrange or do something in our existing place so that we don't have to add a new place? Well, the answer to that is we've, I think, gone about to the limit where we are. To get from the 2 million cases 9 years ago to the 3.8 million, we've added additional racks. We've added a higher level rack system as high as we can in that warehouse. I was out there a little while ago, and we had pallets between the racks because we didn't have room in the racks to put those pallets. That means that the forklifts have to try to drive around those pallets. We had to repair a rack just a couple of weeks ago because someone accidentally backed into it because they didn't have enough room to drive around. So we're bursting at the seams in the existing warehouse. So in order to continue the growth, we need more space in that.
Stop you real quick, Senator Vance. Question or
That
comment?
may not be the question you were expecting, but is that big enough? What you're planning big enough? Because what I get as a complaint is that people can't get the type brands that they want because we don't have enough inventory space. And so I'm not hearing that much extra space that you're going to have in your warehouse. So my question is your plan big enough?
Well, part of the plan is to allow for growth in the new facility. So we're asking for a 250,000 facility to start with the ability to expand up to 325,000 at that same place. So we've got to have enough land at the place we get that we can add on to the side of it, and it'll be designed so we could add on to it fairly easily. So we've thought about exactly what you're saying, that yes, that may not even be enough, especially if we get to the 6 million cases in the next 10 years that we want to get to. Okay. So anyway, those are the 3 questions I tried to anticipate you would want. So, but as I said, I'll answer any more if you got them. Just the last part of my comments. And I apologize again for the very last page. It's got writing on the front and the back. And as I said, it looks like an accountant did it because it's got a lot of numbers. If you flip all the way to the back, the back part that you can see if it's still stapled, the very bottom line, that tells you how much that the ABC board gave to the state entities and the cities and counties, $354 million in 2022. What I tried to do is I tried to project how that number is going to change over the next 3 or 4 years. So in other words, I've got where we are actual in the second column, 11 months of 24, and then where I think we'll be at the end of the 12th month, which is almost over. These are not audited numbers, and they're projections, so keep that in mind. And then the last 3 columns, I tried to say, what will these numbers look like in 24, 25, and 26? The 1 year we're about to finish is 23. At the very bottom line, you can see that what we're distributing to state and local entities, $354 million, should be in the 370 million range this year that we're about to close, and that number will grow up to 379 is a projection, then maybe 389, and then in the last year, 393. The reason I wanted to look at 3 years is hopefully if this project goes off, in that third year, we would be in the new facility and we would be paying rent in the new facility. I assumed that our rent would go up $5 million a year. And that's in this last column already in it, but the distributions still go up in that last year. And it's because as our sales go up, the taxes that are already embedded in the product go up. Okay, and I'll point you to one other number on here without going into all these numbers. Right about the middle of the page, there's a number that says net profits for distribution. If you look, this again, we're still on that back page. That shows $11.3 million for 22. That's part of the $354 million. Because I wanted to say, yes, we're going to distribute more money because we collect more tax because the dollars go up, but will we still have profit left over from our operation to also include in that distribution? So these projections show that even with absorbing that additional, hopefully it won't be $5 million, but that's what I allowed for. Absorbing that additional amount, if you go all the way over to the right side on that same row, that's at $10.7 million in that year. So that's approximately the 11.3 that we did last year. That number will grow a little bit in the next couple of years, but yeah, it'll come down a little bit, but your total distributions will still go up. So those are the numbers we're working off. So that would be the question, can we afford to do this? The answer is yes, we can afford to do it, and I hope these are conservative because these assume 4% increase in costs a year, and on top of that 4%, an additional $5 million of rent in that last year. It assumes 3% increase in sales, and our sales this year are going up 5.8%. So the $3 million is conservative. The $4 million, 3% is conservative. The 4% of costs going up, hopefully that's a little bit high, and I put the rent on top of that. And it still shows at the very bottom that distributions to the state and local governments will go up, and we will still have profits to distribute included in that. And I apologize for taking so long, but that's the comments I wanted to make, and I'll be glad to talk about anything else.
Representative Shedd.
Well, thank you for coming today. I appreciate it very much. And do you have board members with you today?
None of the board members are here.
Okay.
I have staff members, but no board members.
Okay, all right. First of all, let me make it clear, I'm not critical of your decision. I just think that no one should be, and you're not, I'm not insinuating you are, offended when we ask questions about $100 million of public money being spent, because I think we need, as a board, as an oversight committee, that it's our responsibility to ask questions when we see things like this. And I'm not anti-ABC board, so as a matter of fact, I'm a supporter, because I'm not one of these that's pushing for privatization. I don't know where we replace these numbers that you just talked about, and we've got a great accountant here, and he works cheap for this board, and he'll tell us all about tomorrow at 1:15. He'll tell us all about it. I'm not worried about numbers and dollars, that kind of stuff. What I would wonder about is we did a review a couple of months ago. This wasn't even discussed, I don't think. My memory sometimes goes and comes, but I don't remember.
You're right, it wasn't
about this at all. That this was that's a pretty big deal, is it not? $100 million expenditure, not a pretty big deal. Take me back to where the decision started being discussed, and I haven't attended any of your board members, obviously, or anything like that, meetings or anything like that. But how long have you been planning this and that sort of thing?
Well, let me say two things. Number one, I have no problem with you asking questions. I welcome questions. And in fact, I've told people at my church that they ought to look at the numbers. I give them more because I want questions. So I'm glad you asked questions on that. Second thing is that no decision has been made. We lease 175 locations in Alabama, and by state law, we can't own any property. We have to lease. So we have a process that we go through to lease property. This is going through a very similar process. The only difference is we wanted to make sure that we got the best qualified people to bid on this, and that's why the decision was made to put it out as a request for proposal. But
Is your proposal for a lease or purchase?
for a lease, by law, unless you guys change it, we can't own this facility. That would be a good discussion to have, though, if we need to have that one. But we haven't decided that we're going to do this. We wanted to see what kind of proposals we can get. And then, of course, our board would have to look at it and determine it. The finance department would have to have their input. Now, we did get their input on the request, but this is just floating a request to let people give us their proposals on doing this. As far as when this was being discussed some time ago, what we need to do, how could we do it? The problem is our lease is expiring, well, it was expiring March of 25. We were able to secure a 6-month extension. So right now it's going to expire in September of 25. So we've got to do something. So we've been looking at what our options are since I've been there, and whether this is the way to go, or whether there was a way to, say, remodel where we were, or maybe have smaller warehouses around the state. So that's been looked at for several months. But because it's just a request for a proposal, it's not a decision, and we lease stuff all the time, it wasn't something that that we talked about it last time, because it's normal for us to do lease research to determine what we ought to do. As far as the number you threw out, I have no idea what the number will be. The way it would be structured is it would be built to our specifications and leased to us. We wouldn't have any upfront money. There would be no capital infusion in the beginning.
Okay.
Senator Coleman Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you've answered part of my question when you said that it would not be any upfront money. It would be built to your specifications and leased back. So they pay everything to build it.
That's correct.
It's going to be.
And that includes the building as well as the material handling equipment that's included in the building. And if you'll let me say this, what this is requesting that they do is design the material handling system and then construct the building around it so that it would be exactly where it ought to be. For instance, if we did a building and then they had to put the system in it, they might have to retrofit the system. So this way they'll build a building shell around what the equipment will be most efficiently be configured to be. So it'll be one thing, no payments out of pocket for us or the state, and at some point we'll start paying rent.
Okay, but you still have to maintain, even though they own the facility and the equipment, everything that's in it, we are responsible for maintenance of that equipment. Is that correct?
That's correct. We would do the maintenance, and hopefully our maintenance costs will go down, because right now we're probably spending
Repairs.
$250,000 to $500,000 a year trying to keep a Band-Aid on the system we've got. Plus, we have a triple net lease where we are, so we're paying not just rent, but repairs, and we think our utilities may go down too, and I didn't put any of that in these numbers.
Just one last question. Have you run the numbers to look at, Senator Shedd, I think, mentioned about building our own as opposed to leasing, or, I mean, I know that's upfront, but I'm just wondering comparatively, what are we looking at?
We did not run numbers on building because by law we're prohibited from owning facilities. We could structure this as a capital lease so that at the end of the lease we would own it if that was possible under the law. But no, we didn't run any additional numbers to say it would be 100 million. I really don't know where that number came from. I've heard it, but I didn't generate it. But we didn't do anything that says we could spend X up front and then not have to pay rent or anything like that.
Well, right now, it may be the better option, but I'm just wondering, moving forward, looking at long-term, we anticipate ABC stores being around for a while, but I can understand leasing the 175 sites because you don't know where there may be and things change, and you don't want to have a building that you're trying to maintain or trying to sell. Thank you.
I'm not interested in taking on all the people that all the landlords for all the 175 locations, and the senator says markets change, stores close, not necessarily a reason for the state to own all of those, but I will tell you, I'd love to talk to somebody there because I'm interested in dropping a bill that would allow you to own your own facility. I just not crazy about renting this. And if you do rent it, maybe you need to look at renting it from, RSA. They seem to be doing a lot of good things for us. So something to think about.
Well, if I may say this, I would love to have the state be the ultimate beneficiary of this and the state receive the lease payments. That would be great. So if there is such a bill to allow us to buy and own the property or own it at the end of the lease, we would certainly welcome that.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Representative Rafferty.
So just kind of following up with the 175 properties that are leased out, I was curious and I kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about what kind of commitment to diversity we see in the dealings with the ABC, if it's leases, management, contracts, distribution, anything along those lines. And then what is the kind of commitment or plan to expanding that diversity, particularly for historically disadvantaged communities in these business opportunities, like through administrative rules or RFP points or prioritization through some sort of process. I'm just curious if you could walk me through a little bit of that.
Well, of course, our first interest in picking a location for a store is to pick a store that's going to make money. We want to put it in a location that has good traffic, has in a community with good funds, so that we can make money off of it. We certainly want to, and we've begun a process where we let everyone know when there is a store up for lease, and we're even this year we've starting that process about 1 to 2 years ahead of the expiration of the existing lease, so that we publicize it. We go to the local economic development board. We publish it in the newspapers, and that's a new process we've done this year. It's not just word of mouth when a lease comes up. So we want anyone who wants to offer a proposal a chance to know that we've got a store coming up. I will say this though. Sometimes people reach out to us thinking that they're going to get gold-plated rent from us, and we try to pay what the market will bear. Some people think that we give sweetheart rent deals to people that we may know or maybe friends of ours, and I've only been there this year. We certainly aren't doing that, and we're not going to do that going forward. We do have stores that are in leases that have expired, and we're just on a month-to-month lease, and we're going through those as we can get to them, because we want to get all of those remodeled and upgraded and some of those moved, and we want to make sure that they go to places that number one, deserve to have it, because the store needs to be in that location. We don't want it on a poorly traveled part of town that we can't make any money on. So we try to make everybody know what we've got, but we don't do any kind of designations to try to be an economic developer in an area to say, we'll put a store where nothing is. That's not the way we think we can make money.
Right. No, I understand that, the business needs that you would have to be considering first and foremost. I'm just curious if there is a commitment and if you kind of keep track of any of these numbers or anything like that as far as inclusion and diversity as far as with the RFPs and the business dealings that you are working with.
Well, this is the only one we've done a formal RFP through this process, but we do entertain proposals from others. But no, sir, I can't tell you, for instance, what percentage of our stores are owned by minorities or women or people from any particular community. We don't track that. We can take a look at tracking it if that's something we need to do. Okay, I'd be interested in talking to you. Hopefully you do have my number that was sent around.
I think Senator Gudger, unless anybody else got any other questions or comments, we'll let this be the last one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm a big fan of your products. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Second of all, I know there's been talks for the past couple of years about RTDs. Obviously, it's a pretty popular subject anyway, and they seem like they continue to grow and grow and grow in quantity and the volume that people would like to get those products in their hands anyway. From that, though, this warehouse seems to be growing a couple million cases. If that changes to where the RTDs go in private hands. Does that change the whole need for this warehouse, or do you still need this warehouse if RTDs were gone?
Well, the short answer is yes, we still need this facility because the volume of liquor sales is growing either way. The RTDs are, and I don't know the exact number, but it's around 200,000 cases a year. So that's not 10% of our volume. But liquor as a whole is growing, and even if we don't get this, we'll still need the new warehouse.
And I just wanted to hear you say which way it went, so I appreciate you giving me that answer, and thanks for all you do.
Okay.
It's amazing how much you give back to the locals and the communities.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I think I incorrectly said last time and this time too director, but administrator I think is the correct title. Is that?
That is correct, but you're not the only one that calls me director. My wife does something. So.
Better that than other things, huh?
Yes, sir.
Listen, I appreciate you coming, and thank you for answering the questions today. Thank you
And
so
can
much.
I reiterate, though, that I'd be glad to talk to any member on the committee if you want to talk at some point or come out and visit with us. I'd be glad to have you out there.
Thank you for that. Thanks so much. Okay. All right, Holly, if you would, let's call the roll and let's get started on the normal agenda.
Senator Coleman Madison, Senator Gavan, Senator Gudger, Senator Kelly, Senator Stewart, Representative Pringle, Representative Rafferty, Representative Shedd, Representative Simpson, Representative Underwood, Representative Wilcox, and Senator Will Barfoot.
Here, full house today. Good, good. All right, that's, I know, really. That is what happens. You offer food and everybody shows up. All right, let's get started. Looks like the first one on the agenda today is the 911 board. Dixie, all yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see everybody. We are going to get started with a statewide 911 board. This board was created, it was formerly known as the Commercial Mobile Radio Services Board. Commercial Mobile Radio Services is also CMRS throughout this report, and if I say that, that's what I'm talking about, because I will forget to say all the words for y'all. But it was created by Act Number 2012-293. It's responsible for establishing a statewide 911 charge to administer the 911 fund and monthly charge to distribute revenue in the 911 fund, to develop and publish an annual report, and to administer the deployment and operation of a statewide 911 voice and data system. Currently, each telephone subscriber in Alabama pays $1.86 per phone line on their phone bill, and this revenue is forwarded to the State 911 Board by telephone service providers. Some of it comes straight from the providers, and some of it comes through the Department of Revenue. This, there are 13 members on this board. They are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. There are currently 10 members serving. The District 3 position is open. There is a CMRS provider position open and a voice over IP service provider open. They are required to have a member from each of the 7 districts. The board members are not paid. The board has an administrator, Ms. Leah Misseldine. She's the executive director with an annual salary of $159,955.29. That's set by the board. The board employs 5 employees. For legal counsel, they have a professional services contract with a private law firm, Brunson, Barnett, and Scherer. The board pays the firm $195 per hour for any of the 3 attorneys to provide services. All services should not exceed $180,000 a year. For their finances, they are not in the state treasury, and all revenues are derived from the state service charge. So the reason we have a screen today is the required distribution and the uses of the funds are a little complicated. And so I made a chart for y'all. It looks like this. Y'all have a copy, and I was going to go through the chart to demonstrate how it's supposed to work, and then I'll have another sheet to show what they're doing. And this is important because once I get into the significant issues, your understanding of this will make it flow a lot better. So let's hope the clicker works. Okay. There we go. All right, so as I said, there's $1.86. $1.86 service charge per phone line. That's a wireless phone or wired phone. comes in every month. The month that I'm showing here for your numbers, these are the actual revenues for September of 2022, so the last month of this sunset review. So they got $10,831, $10,831,003.81. So that's how much came in that. Statutorily, that money is coming in, and the first thing that happens is 1% comes off the top, and that's to be used for the board's operation. So it's 100. It's 1% of actual revenues that come in. The remaining 99% is split and distributed based on what kind of money it is. So if the money comes in from CMRS providers or prepaid amounts, those are wireless money mostly, it is split two ways. The split is roughly 85% to 15%. It varies each month based on what comes in. So the wireless money is split 80% to the ECD, so down to the locals, your county ECD, and some of your cities have 99. And then up to 20% is available to CMRS providers. And what they use this for is when the FCC comes up with standards they have to follow to be in compliance to make the 911 services work, some of those expenditures can be reimbursed to the service providers through some of this money. That money is sent to the board's reserve account, okay? So the remaining money that was left out of the 99%, that's the other revenues. 100% of that is supposed to go to the ECD. Roughly, that's about 15% of it every month. So if you look at these numbers that are here, what you'll see is the 10 million that comes in at the top, every bit of it belongs somewhere else. So it all comes in to a revenue account in one place, and then it all goes back. Can I borrow some paper? Sorry. Okay. So the main point of this is everything comes in to the revenue bank account, and it all belongs somewhere else. So that's the important thing to remember. Everything that goes in goes back out. It shouldn't stay, other than the 1% that the board keeps for their operations. I want to say, do y'all have any questions?
But can I just interject as we go?
Yes.
Through? I don't want
Yeah, go right ahead. As a matter of fact, y'all jump in. If there's a melee of who's going to talk first, I'll point somebody, but y'all just jump in along the way.
Thank you, sir. So that top account that received the initial money, still, even that 1% goes into a separate operations account, correct?
Yes, it is transferred to an operating bank account.
And I like that setup where there's an initial receipt of every revenue stream that comes in and moves out. But in the end, that initial checking account moves to zero at some point in time. And I realize that there will be deposits along the way. Do you know how often deposits are in that month? Is it like
they're
every
coming
day?
pretty steady throughout the month.
So, I know at some point in time they may say, well, here's my cutoff, and then that's going to go to the next month. But in theory, that top account should be zero.
Right. It should be a pass-through account. Everything that comes in should go out. It'll never be zero on the bank statement because they'll already be paying some more money in. But when they remit the money to the board, it's labeled as for what month's collections is for. So they know what's coming in and what's for which month.
Okay.
When you went back up to the top where it says wireless, is that also when you have an account for like an iPad or anything else that has 911 capability?
Yes. If it will call.
Make sure y'all use microphone too, so everybody listening online can hear.
I'm sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. My question was, and when you say wireless, it also has to deal with iPads or any type of laptop devices that are able to call 911.
That is my understanding, that if it has a 911 service, that it will.
And it looks like that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even if like your Apple Watch has a separate thing that's not your phone or anything like that, it would have that fee attached to it. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is what the statute requires to happen. Uh-oh, wrong way. I'm sorry. This is my first time using this clicker. Okay. So this is what has actually been happening. So this is on the second page of your handout. So the same amount of money is coming in. We're using the same September 2022 number. What the board is currently doing, oh, I have a light. They're taking 1%, but they're using a baseline amount. So every 5 years, the board looks at what is needed to make their ECDs whole. And it's a calculation that they do, and it's what they call the baseline. So it's not necessarily what is actually coming in every month that they're using to calculate. They're using a baseline. So what is happening is it's about 10.4 million that is their baseline rather than the 10.8 million that I'm showing. That's why it says $104,000 is transferred. That's what they do every month. They take 1%. They send it to the operations account. They take 20%, which is 1.6 million. They transfer it to the reserves account. They use it for the same purposes that I described before, but they're sending the same amount every month, regardless of what the actual revenues are. They're also sending an amount to what they are calling an examiner's account. They're sending $83,000 a month to the examiner's account. The examiner's account is used to pay the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts because we are statutorily required to audit the local ECDs every 2 years. And we do that, and then we bill the board for those audit hours. However, according to the statute, this amount should be being paid for with the operating monies. So it should be being paid for with the 1% that they're taking off the top. But instead, they're putting this amount into a different account every year. Now, the law does allow them, if their operating funds did not cover the cost of our audits, it will allow them to withhold extra money. But they're just withholding this amount every month and sending it to an examiner's account. Then they're sending $8.6 million out to the ECDs every month. For the last 2 years, the same amount every month. Regardless of what the actual revenues are, they're using the baseline to make their distributions. So for this example, $10.8 million comes in. They make these 4 transfers that they do every month. And then at the end of this month, there's $389,000 still sitting in that revenues bank account that didn't go out anywhere.
Which includes that 80-something million, 80-something thousand that you just referenced for the examiner's account.
Right, so that's already left. So that really shouldn't be going there unless they need it. And so it would be on top of this. So, because they've already sent it. So if you take what they did, the 389 would be left in that bank account. And remember, that bank account should, everything that goes in every month should go back out every month.
So you said this should zero out. What are they doing with this money?
It's sitting there.
Right.
This revenues bank account has a reconciled cash balance. So that's after they do their reconciliation of knowing what they have in there that is for the next month of about $14 million.
Senator Van.
So forgive me, Mr. Chairman, I'm new to the committee. What is the process? Because I can just tell you now, I'd like this board to have an opportunity to come back and explain this to us next year about how they fixed all this. So how are we going to go about setting, who's good for 4 years, who's good for 1 year? I assume we're going to vote on that tomorrow, but how's that process normally work?
Well, I've got a year head start on you, but that's not much. But tomorrow we will have those discussions and entertain motions about whether or not, 5 options available, sunset, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, or full 4 year provision. And the committee gets an opportunity to make that a recommendation and put that into a bill format and then go through the legislative process.
The question though, if we sunset this committee, if you read the report, there are great reviews as far as the board members, and we understand the importance of the 911 system and what it does. As a matter of fact, I think other states kind of envy us, but the question of this and not following the law as it is written, of what that, I would like some explanation. I don't know. Maybe they have a reason for this, but it is not here.
Sorry, I'm
So,
space here.
I don't know, I guess they are
Yeah,
here
and I
today, so-
suspect tomorrow we'll have an opportunity. They'll certainly, I know Ms. Missildines here and is listening to questions or concerns that we have now, and I'm sure we'll be available tomorrow, so.
The other question I asked is, since they are listening, is that which method, I mean, since they've chosen to do this for several years now, what method works best, and should we be making some changes to make it work? I mean, depending upon what they say this money is going to be used for.
Well, so the first sheet that says statutory distribution, I mean, that's exactly what the law spells out is supposed to happen. And then we did discuss this with the board and Ms. Missildine and go over what we found and kind of said, are we missing something? So, and here's where we have landed.
Okay, well, maybe they can fill in the holes tomorrow.
So just to, I'm so sorry.
It's okay, I'm finished.
Okay. The baseline you said they use, basically, the amount that goes to the ECDs is the same every month.
It has been for the last 2 years.
Yeah, so regardless of the revenue coming in, the monthly amount has been very consistently the same.
Right, and it was some in the prior 2 years, but the last 2 years, they were able to provide us the best information to do the calculations on. That's why everything is 21 and 22.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, if I could move through something real quick on page 8 in your book, I just think it's appropriate to talk about this now, since you've shown how the money comes in and is not necessarily gone into the right bucket at the right amounts. The money's come in and is accounted for, but it's not going into the right bucket at the right amounts. And so on page 8, you've got the reconciled cash balances at September 30. The revenue account in 2022, 14.2 million should be zero.
Yes, sir.
Because it should move out to the other accounts.
Right.
Operating is what it is. That's
Right,
just
that's their money
what they
to
work out
use.
of, and
Right.
so that's fine. The DEPA is for,
That's the examiner's account, yes.
it shouldn't be that much,
It could have money in it if they found that they needed it, but
right? But not 1.1 million.
no, sir.
Because your charges, I know there's lots of them to look at. Y'all do 80-something in the state.
Right.
Your annual billings I mean, that's more than it needs to be.
The last 2 years, we've charged just under $500,000 for our examinations, and the $83,200 a month totals right at $1 million that is going into the fund.
Yeah.
So the
We're
last 2
prepaid
years.
for 2 years, basically, at that balance.
At one, yes.
Yeah.
So we had charged $500,000 a year, but they're transferring $1 million.
Okay. The reserves account is the one that's set aside for the FCC, whatever requirements they may change that can be granted out basically to the wireless and other providers.
Right.
Correct. Can that also go to the local
Yes.
if there's requirements that they need?
Yes, if the locals need money, and so they have also out of that
Equipment.
account been, so the state has been moving to a new system, a new 911 system. It's an upgraded system. It has some new GIS capabilities, which is great. If you call 911, you want the dispatcher to know where you are. And so that is integrated into the system. And so when they do it at the state level, the locals have to do it too. And so they have to upgrade their systems. And so some of this money does go back out to them when they request it to help with those upgrades.
Okay, and that's encouraging. And that's really it for the most part. I know there's some grant money. I see in 2019, there were some pretty big monies coming to there by grant and federal grants, so I'm assuming that was distributed out to maybe to the locals or...
That usually
whatever,
stays at the
but-
state level, and it's for
Yeah.
things like upgrading
Right,
systems and
right.
everything, and it,
But
they
on
have-
that reserves account, is there a cap? Like if they don't ask for it, can it grow to be 200 million? If nobody asks for it in 10 years, can it just keep growing? I know it won't do that, but I'm just saying,
so that is actually one of the significant issues that we have, is that the board amended its administrative rules in March of 2020 to stipulate that that fund shall at all times maintain a balance equal to 180 days. So that's 6 months.
in that reserves,
Yes.
which is the one that's the grant money out to the wireless providers and to the,
Yes.
okay,
So,
is that right?
yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
They don't really know what the request will be though, right? I mean, those are just they just come in when they come in.
Right. So
That's hard to measure that 180 on that, but that's okay. I'm just,
we asked
Get my
that
feet wet.
question, but
Yeah.
It's my understanding that when they said 180 days of the reserves, that was going to be 180 days of a whole month's distribution. So even the ECD distribution, all of those parts is what they were trying to obtain. So that means based on their baseline, that's $60 million just to hold in reserve in case it was needed.
That's too much.
Yeah. So if y'all let me, I'll read through the significant issues because we're touching on pieces of them.
Sorry, I'm jumping around.
It's okay. It's okay.
I was trying to tie your flow chart to the current balances.
Yes.
And so I think we did that. So I apologize for jumping around.
No.
Just one last comment, since they're listening, I would like a list, if they would give all the members, of what grants they have given to the local providers. Because I know in one case there was something that came up in my area that they were trying to upgrade based on, I assume, the changes had been made on the state level and they had to upgrade their equipment. Money was an issue. I wasn't aware about this grant, and maybe there are some other municipalities or counties that's not aware of it. So I'd like to find out, I get a list of how many counties or cities that they have helped and how much.
Okay. All right, so if you'll turn to page 5, that's where the significant issues start, and I will read through these. So the first one is that funds received by the board are not being properly dispersed. The board used a baseline calculation to make its monthly distributions instead of calculating disbursements based on each month's actual receipts. The board's use of a baseline distribution has resulted in funds not being properly retained by the board for its administrative expenses or properly reserved for disbursements to CMRS providers or the ECDs for their use. The code requires that all funds are deposited into the revenue account as from the service charge. The board shall administer the fund and make disbursements. All funds received for the service charge are put into the board's revenue account and should be dispersed to local ECDs and the board's other accounts in accordance with Code Section 1198.1. The board is required to calculate the baseline revenues needed to properly fund the board and the ECDs. The code does allow for the board from time to time, but no more than once every fiscal year, to increase or decrease the rate of the state 911 charge by an amount reasonably calculated to produce the baseline revenues, plus any additional revenues necessary to meet the requirements of ensuring no district receives less than the sum of the total dollar amount in the initial baseline distribution. That means that they're always going to make sure that they charge enough money to make sure they make the ECDs whole. They want them to have what they're supposed to have.
Question.
Ma'am.
I noticed looking at, there's a chart in here somewhere that compared Alabama to the surrounding states. Ours is higher. And I'm looking at the money that you got here in a whole. It seems like you're collecting more than you need. Why have we not reduced that rate?
Yeah, the code allows them to at least once, no more than one time each fiscal year, adjust the rate so it can meet the needs of the board. So if they can increase it or they can decrease it. So the code allows for them to do that.
Based on the money they got, I guess they're going to have to answer that one.
So it was increased in Senator Gudger asked them the last time they increased it. And it was increased in 2018, so the year before this sunset period, and it is due to change again on October 1st of 2023. And it is going to go up based on, I don't know.
Is that a CPI calculation?
Yes, it is. That's how the code is. It is.
We've had some pretty high rates the last 2 years, so.
Right. It's based on the Consumer Price Index.
But I would also like to point on what you read, the last paragraph the last sentence on the third paragraph. States that the board shall certify that the state 911 charge adopted is reasonably calculated so as not to exceed the funding requirements. So
That's
it's kind of like it's been a cap sort of, a buffer on there to say you just can't,
right.
I'm sorry, I hate to be the attorney that doesn't know math, but I just have an issue with what's been discussed here. Because I think you've talked about surrounding states, but it's not just surrounding states, it's the entire country.
Right.
That they're the highest in the country, and they're increasing their rates, and they're sitting on $41 million. Like that seems like it's not in the best interest of the taxpayer. It's not in the interest of the individual serving this, that we're going to raise rates and continue to sit on this amount of money. That's troublesome to me.
Yes, sir.
And to kind of further complicate that, the 911 boards local, for me, for District 3 in Colbert and Lauderdale, are hurting for money. we almost raised a local bill to raise the fees in Lauderdale. We just ran out of time. But we almost raised the rates, which, that kind of hurts me a little bit with raising rates when we have money. I didn't realize where we were at with this at the time, but I'm glad we didn't get it through, because I'd have had a hard time explaining that.
I know that there's other operations that are looking to be created, specifically the 988 board is looking for funding to try to find something to go on to be able to establish people with mental health. And 911 is just sitting on $41 million and saying we're going to raise the rates on top of that for ourselves. That's, this is not robbing the Peter to pay Paul. This is robbing Peter and just keeping the money.
Both of them.
Dixie?
All right. The rest of the significant issue explains the process that I just said before, that the 1% comes off the top and goes into the operating account. And then the remaining 99% shall be apportioned into 80%. 80% of the 99% that's left over goes to the ECDs, and then 20% goes into the reserves for the CMRS providers, into the board's reserve account to be exclusively used for the payment of the actual direct costs incurred by CMRS providers in complying with E911 service requirements established by the Federal Communications Commission. So the board is making the transfers as we laid out each month. For 38 of the 48 months covered in the sunset review period, the board used baseline 911 revenue amounts rather than actual 911 revenues received each month when making their monthly transfers. The board's use of the 911 distribution each month resulted in funds received by the board not being properly dispersed. Because all funds received for the service charge are deposited into the revenue account and are either to be retained for administrative services, paid to ECDs, or held for payments to those providers, that bank account should operate as a pass-through bank account. That means everything that comes into the revenue bank account should be subsequently dispersed. However, as of September 30th, 2022, the reconciled cash balance was $14,288,016.14. The next significant issue continues with not properly dispersing funds to ECDs as required. As stated before, that other money that is not the wireless money, so it comes in every month, the 99% that can be split, some is wireless, some is not. The part that is not is required to be 100% dispersed to the ECDs. The calculation being used by the board for its monthly distribution does not appear to include this when they are making disbursements of the other 911 charges. It's not there. Every month they send out a letter and it shows their calculation of what they're sending out to the boards, and that amount doesn't appear to be on that letter. It's not used in their calculation. So for example, during the two most recent years of the sunset review, the baseline distribution utilized by the board only accounted for 1%, the administrative allowance, the reserve amount to cover the costs of the audits, and then the 20%. The board's omissions of these amounts in their calculations has resulted in $3.5 million not being dispersed in fiscal year 2022, and just over $2 million not being dispersed to ECDs in 2021. It's
Bottom of page 6.
yeah, $3,516,052.31 in fiscal year 22, and then $2,077,989.70 in 21.
So just to reiterate, that's just 2 years.
That's just 2 years.
Which is 5.5 million, almost 5.6. My understanding is I think they've gotten a letter that they're going to receive funding for that they did go ahead when they saw your report and either issue already or notify that they're going to issue that money.
That's part of their response, yes. Yeah. Okay.
But that's just 2 years.
That's just 2 years. Okay. We're at the top of page 7 at significant issue number 3. During the sunset review period, the board withheld more additional funds than were necessary to reimburse the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts for costs associated with the examinations of the local emergency communication districts. This created a reconciled cash balance in the examiner's account of $1.1 million at the end of September 22. So from May of 2020, through September of 2022, the board has retained an additional amount of $83,000 each month from the funds that are received. These additional funds were transferred to the board's examiner's account to be used to reimburse costs charged by the Department of Examiners. The code states that the board shall reimburse the examiners for the actual cost of the board's audits, and that's the examinations of the 85 local ECDs, from any unused funds that are retained in its operating bank account for administrative expenses under Section 1198 5.2B, the 1%. To the extent that the board's 1% retained for administrative expenses is not sufficient to pay for the audits, then they are allowed to withhold additional monies. We perform the audits and the examinations of the local ECDs on a rotating basis. We do them every other year, and each ECD has an examination completed. We provided cost estimates for these examinations in fiscal years 20, 21, and 22 to the board. So we gave them an estimate of how much it was going to cost to do the audits. So we have a chart in here that shows the amount that was withheld by the board for our examinations every year, how much we charged, and what the difference was. Based on the board's reconciled cash balances at the end of each fiscal year in its operating bank account, that 1%, the cost of examinations performed by the examiners could have been provided for by the funds in the operating bank account rather than the board withholding and depositing additional funds.
Right, because it still has 1.3 million in it for 2022.
Yes, the operating has.
So it could have come out of that and still had 700 plus left in it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Significant issue number 4 is that the board amended its rules in March of 2020 to stipulate that the cost recovery fund shall at all times maintain a balance, minimum balance equal to 180 days operational and administrative costs of the board. This practice has shorted the other local entities of additional disbursements. The board lacks statutory authority to promulgate administrative rules that allow the board to amass the reserves or that would override statutorily required distributions. While the board did make additional disbursements of cost recovery funds in accordance with Code Section 11985F of $2 million in fiscal year 19, $5 million in fiscal year 20, $2.2 million in 21, and 5.1 in 2022, the reconciled cash balance of the board's cost recovery fund at September 30th, 2022 was still $24,461,183.14.
I'm sorry. Did you say the board did not have statutory authority to amend their rules to require this 180-day operational and administrative costs?
Yes, sir.
They just did it of their own accord?
Yes, sir.
Dixon.
Okay, on the top of page 8, the board has accrued and continues to amass large balances in their bank accounts instead of making requisite distributions or reevaluating fees being charged to consumers. On September 30th, 2022, the board had a combined total cash balances of $41,561,755.87 in its various bank accounts. As discussed in previous significant issues, Code Section 11985C1 says that the board can increase or decrease the rate of the state 911 charge by an amount reasonably calculated to produce baseline 911 revenues. We have a chart in here showing the reconciled cash balances for the sunset review period. Also below the chart, we have, for historical purposes, years before the sunset review period. So the combined balances in fiscal year 2014 were $15 million, and they grew to $18.9 million in 15, $23 million in 16, $23 million in 17, $33 million in 18, and then you can see how it grew in the chart. The last thing that we have is a prior significant issue that has been brought forward. It has to do with surveys of the emergency communication districts that we questioned. 49 responded to our survey. And to the question that is, what is the most significant issue currently facing your profession? 16 mentioned funding or lack of funding. 30 of the 49 stated hiring and retention of staff was the most significant issue. And those are all of them for this board.
Let me ask you this. How many ECDs are there statewide?
85 right now.
So every county plus various municipalities?
Yes. There were 88 recently, and they tend to merge. So right now there are 85.
All right. So, and those 85, Senator Coleman Madison was talking about grants, and I guess that's the correct term, but there is, I'm assuming, a formula that each of those entities should receive. So it's not, we're going to give you a little more this month or not give this one. There's a formula.
Right. So their monthly distribution, it's split in half, and it's based on population, and then it's an equal split.
Okay.
And that's how they get their money each month.
And is that set by the board or by statute? Okay. All right, members, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, Dixie?
Can I ask one more question before we move on? I'm so sorry. If I chose one of those ECDs, like one in my district, one county, and could you use these formulas and tell me how much they should receive on an annual basis?
Yes, we could try.
Or let me make, not that they should, but should have received, right? Because those numbers vary month to month on who has a landline, who has a cell phone.
But if we took the 12 months of 2022, applied every month, I'm just curious to know if it's enough for one particular ECD or one anywhere for them to look at that and say, oh, well, yeah, we can make it on that, or that's still not quite enough.
We could take the calculation that is statutorily required based on the actual revenues received, and then we could apply it to the same way that they would distribute the money each month.
Yeah, I'm not interested in how it did happen, just
Right, how it
if we could take the statute, take the actual revenues, how much would they have received in 2022?
I don't know that I can get this done this evening.
It's okay. No. I'm not asking for it tonight. I'm not. I should have started with that. Yeah. Hey, I don't, I won't be asleep till 10. It's fine. Hey, you know what? I would like to state how much I have enjoyed working with you and y'all's entire department. Has been a joy, and you are really good at what you do, and I thank you for it.
If you want me to try that on one, send me an email and we'll work on it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not asking for it. Don't have to be any time within, this week even.
Thanks.
I just want to know if it's enough to work.
Okay. 40 tomorrow. You said that into the microphone.
Happy birthday.
You are not asking her to spend her last night in her 30s doing some free from.
No, it could be on her birthday itself. It's fine.
All right, Dixie, I'm going to get you out of this conversation if you want to continue.
Okay. So this board does not actually issue any licenses, so there are no licensees to be accounted for. The ECDs, the locals, are who they provide funds to, so you won't find any of that in here. We've already touched on the fact that in their performance characteristics, we have the surrounding states rates. And then in Appendix 3 of the report, which starts around page 50, we included all the surrounding states. And now that chart is from April of 21, but we pulled it from the National Foundation or National Association for 911 Boards. And that was the most up-to-date information they had, but we thought it would be helpful to include it for you guys. We've already gone through the funds, and then on page 14 and 15 are the total payments that were sent out to each district for the sunset period. These numbers do include the cost recovery disbursements that were sent out. So that's why it's not the same exact amount every year, because they did do some cost recovery money that goes out. And then when the locals were upgrading their systems to be in line with the Engine system, which is the state's updated 911 system, they did reimburse those costs to them too. So those are all included in those amounts. The board's financials are on page 16. We have already said that at the end of 2022, they have combined cash balances of $41.8 million. Their professional services are mostly related to data processing. They also spend a lot of data processing funds on upgrading to their Engine system, and that is the Alabama Next Generation Emergency Network. And they have spent a lot of funds to upgrade, like I said, the GIS system related to that. That's in your professional services appendix in this report. And I went through and and mark some of those up, but we separated out what was strictly for the engine project because that's such a large amount of what they spend was $14 million in 22, and that's something that we have to have. I mean, you need the upgraded system. I know if I'm on a back road in Culver County, I want them to be able to find me when I call 911. So, I think they have a couple.
Yeah, we got more.
If y'all have any questions?
This is maybe not a question directly for you, but, on the legal side of the equation, if there are, and you don't have to answer now, but just be thinking about this because if I don't ask it now, I may forget. Are there any legal impediments for the board to correct these errors by sending that money out? And so, okay. If you know the answer, if y'all have looked at that already.
We actually have thought the next steps and thought about how do you rectify this situation. And Dixie had the 21, 22 numbers trying to figure out how to rectify the situation, which the state 911 board has already tried to do that with the numbers she had. But we only could rectify it in our head because really if the statute does not change or y'all don't do anything different with the law as far as distributions or what to do with these balances, we will say that they need to do it to the distributions of the statute. And so we've got to figure out how to do it. Dixie could not get the numbers past 21 historically to get to those very, very specific numbers that she listed. I think the 2 million and the 3 million for those 2 fiscal years. She couldn't get the historical numbers on that. So I don't know where that leaves us, but we've got to figure that out. And if we can't come to that, then when it gets to session time, then, the state 911 board is probably going to come to y'all and have to figure out something for a change in the law to figure out how to rectify this situation. But that would be what we would say if nothing changed would need to happen, is you do exactly what the law says. So we got to go back and do the historical calculations.
Okay, when you said you couldn't get them, is it because they're not available or?
So for 21 and 22, they were able to tell me exactly, like it was 84.7% wireless this month, and then the remaining point was the wired, the other revenue. So prior to 21, they had a different system in place, and they couldn't tell me the exact amounts, and so I didn't feel comfortable going off them if I didn't know where they came from, how they got to it, to put that information in the report. They gave me some information, but it wasn't as precise as what we had for 21 and 22.
Okay, all right.
They did provide us something, just not. So.
Members, any other questions, comments, concerns?
Just a comment. So we may not be able to unring that bill. We may have to kind of start where we are, the figures that you do have moving forward, to try to rectify it moving forward. And I guess if legislation needs to come forward that we need to put in place so that everybody's on the same page.
When did you complete their audit?
In the last, we could finish it in August because it was right before, because this one was scheduled to come in August and we asked to push it to September. That was our request.
And then they've had a time to review it and reply.
Yes, their response is in the report.
And have they had any board meetings since then to try to rectify it? Because I was trying to look for their minutes of their meetings, and some of that on their finance committee is not available on their website.
It is this week. It was last week. I knew it was in September. They've had one board meeting since.
All right, and when do you anticipate those minutes being on your website available for review? Okay. All right. I'd love a draft copy tomorrow for all the members. Thank you. That'd be great.
Members, any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir.
One more.
Yes, sir. Go
Sorry.
right ahead.
Is it statutory requirements that it increases or decreases every 5 years based on that inflationary calculation?
Yes,
So that's a required thing.
That is in the statutes.
And we don't have an estimate today of what that would be.
I
We don't know what CPI is over the last 5 years. Okay, so right at 20 cents.
All right. Thank y'all. All right, next on the agenda is the Board of Public Accountants. Say it. Board of Public Accountancy.
Yes, sir. That's
Say that right?
Yes. They're good.
Okay.
In fact, let's just move on. I mean, yeah, there's nothing to say. That'll be a film at 11.
I did have the occasion, they have their meetings around the state, and last week they held one in Mobile, Alabama that I had the opportunity to attend. They invited me, and it was nice to see a bunch of the students. They're also going to different colleges that teaches accounting and doing their outreach in that manner by having the meetings, and the kids get credit.
All right.
So there were a couple of significant issues that I do think need to be addressed tomorrow. The third issue.
Oh, you talking about you're not back on the 911, right?
I'm sorry, no.
Okay.
We're already on the
Let's
public
let Dixie
account.
give a report, kind of an overview, and then.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
All right. So this board, the Accountancy Board, was established by Act Number 1973, 1991, and they license and regulate the profession and practice of public accounting. The board has 7 members appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. They have 1 public member, and the others are CPAs. The board members are not paid. They just get paid travel reimbursement. They have 1 minority member serving. The administrator is Executive Director Boyd Busby. He has a current salary of $215,995.92. It is set by the board. They have 9 at-will employees. Their legal counsel is in-house. Billington Garrett is a retired state employee who provides their legal counsel. Their funds are from licensing fees, examination fees, and penalties. Their monies are housed in the state treasury, and there are no required distributions. As of December 31st of 2022, they had a total of 13,539 licensees. You do have to pass a test to become a CPA. So the pass-fail rates for Alabama schools are located in Appendixes 3 through 5 of our report. We had 2018 and 19. The 20 through 22 were not available from the National Association, but we did include what we were able to get. There were 3 significant issues noted in this report. The first one is that the board is charging a fee for which a specific amount is not set by law. The board has not established an administrative rule setting, the board has not established an administrative rule setting the specific amount to be charged for this fee. So Section 34.111D allows the board to impose a reinstatement fee not to exceed $100. The board currently charges a reinstatement fee of $100 despite having no rule established to collect the specified amount. The board did stop charging this fee once we informed them of the issue. The second significant issue is the board established an administrative rule to assess court cost and a deposit fee to complainants filing complaints with the board that are not authorized by statute. The rule states that in the event that charges brought are not sustained and the accused is declared not guilty by the board, the complainant shall be assessed all costs in connection with the hearing of the complaint. And as evidenced by good faith, the board in its discretion may require the complainant to deposit with the board at the time of the filing of a complaint a certified check in the sum of $100 payable to the board. According to the executive director, the board has not actually assessed or collected these court costs in the last 8 years. The third significant issue noted is 15 of the 30 certified public accountants and 18 of the 25 certified public accounting firms responding to our survey stated that the lack of college students choosing public accounting as a profession and the hiring and retention of qualified accountants is the most significant issue facing their profession in Alabama. According to the licensees, factors contributing to this issue include difficulties in recruiting from college campuses, the decreasing number of candidates sitting for the CPA exam, and the 120 semesters hour rule to receive certification and disproportional work-life balance.
Okay.
That's what I was going to comment on. That. Yeah, that's just life. I mean, there's a lot of places where we're having struggle with attracting people in, and I mean, my daughter's going through this right now. It's tough, but you know, being a CPA is not supposed to be easy. So,
I just continue to struggle with the amount of boards that come before us that are just creating their own fees and establishing their own fees when we've got it pretty set in stone that you cannot create your own fees. If you need to create a fee, it needs to come through the legislature and go through the process and approved in that manner. And so I'm happy that the board is setting a new tone. I'm happy that this committee is setting a new tone, but just, you know, we've still got committees next year. We've got committees the years after that. If anybody is listening and paying attention to this, if you're setting your own fees, we have problems with that.
And
I think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'd just like to add, they have not actually assessed or collected these court costs in the last 8 years.
You go crazy.
I know. But, I mean, the reason why I'm pretty sure I attended their hearings is prior to their board meetings, so their hearings are open to the public right there prior to their actual board meeting. So, is that correct, Boyd? All right.
All right,
Okay.
committee members? Questions, comments, or concerns? Dixie, anything else?
Their financials are found on page 15. At the end of fiscal year 2022, their unobligated cash balance was $1.9 million. Their board member letter is, I would like to say it's from January of 2023. This is one of the first sunsets we did, but due to scheduling conflicts, they got moved from July to September. So they do have some different board members than what are listed here, and they were already replaced and they were already confirmed by the Senate, so good job on the confirmations.
Yeah.
So, but that's all that I have. Mr. Boyd Busby did provide you guys with a handout that shows Alabama's CPAs. That's what, can you show that, Senator Barfoot? It looks like this. You guys all have one with your packet of stuff that's from the board, and it shows how Alabama stacks up against national numbers, and he wanted that to be seen.
And it looks like, unless I'm reading this wrong and I don't have my glasses, it looks like the last several years that the average score we've increased or gotten better compared to other states. Am I reading that right? And that the pass rates have got improved in Alabama compared to other states as well?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right, members, any other questions, comments, concerns? If not, we'll move to the insurance department. Dixie, you want to tell us about them?
This one is 2 reports, and that is just because it has a law in the back that is 90 pages, and we didn't want to give y'all this binder to make it snow, so we had to split it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The insurance department was reorganized and named the Department of Insurance by Act 1951-234. They administer the laws of the state that regulate or otherwise relate to insurance, the insurance business, and insurance companies, associations, exchanges, societies, and their agents and representatives doing business in the state. They also have authority through the state fire marshal to inspect buildings, to investigate fires or explosions, to supervise fire protection sprinkler industries, and regulate the manufacture, sale, and use of combustibles and explosives. There have been numerous laws passed since the last sunset regarding the Department of Insurance, that they are all here for you. The profile starts on page 8. This Department of Insurance does not have a board. They have a commissioner. That is Mr. Mark Fowler. He is appointed by the governor. It was effective January 13th of 2023, and his annual salary is $161,928. The Department of Insurance has 155 employees. The legal counsel is in-house. These funds, they have 8-ish funds that are housed in the state treasury. Their funds come from licensing and regulatory fees. They do have some required distributions. On a semi-annual basis, the fire marshal has to transfer money to the Alabama Firefighters Annuity and Benefit Fund in an amount equal to 5% of the fees collected during the last 6 months pursuant to the code. Unused funds at the end of the year are in the Insurance Department Fund, unencumbered and unexpended balances at the end of each fiscal year in excess of 25% of the amount appropriated for that fiscal year must be transferred to the State General Fund. Act 2022 required funds to be transferred to the Strengthen Alabama Homes Fund. All those transfers were made appropriately during our sunset review period. As of May 17th of 2023, the individual licenses that have been issued there were 237,933 licenses issued. The business entity licenses, there were 13,647. And the fire marshal had issued 700 permits or certifications from its division. There are no significant issues or prior findings for the Department of Insurance. This is a big department. They have 13 different divisions. Those are outlined for you. Unless you guys want me to go through them, I will let you know that they are on pages 19 through 21. The only thing that you guys have already been informed about when we did the Funeral Services Board, they have a pre-need division during the sunset review period, and we know that there was a law that is moving that over to the Funeral Services Board, so that will change.
What's status on that? Like, is there an implementation timeframe that we have locked in, or is it just as they do it?
I think it was supposed to start more in the current fiscal year, but I'm not 100% on that.
That's okay. I was curious how long that would take.
They gave them some time to make the transition.
Yeah. I like that move, by the way. I think it was wise, and because it's more related to the funeral homes than to the insurance. But I know they're connected, but I think that was a good move.
The performance characteristics are on page 25, and this shows that the number of licensees, the individual and businesses, have increased through the sunset review period for both. We've gone in total from 185,000 licensees in 2019 to 251,000 licensees in 2022.
Dixie, what's a blaster?
Okay, so from an elementary term that I could kind of get, and I can call the state fire marshal and ask him, and I will, and tell you tomorrow for sure, but I think it's somebody who has to be permitted to blow stuff up, like use dynamite. Like, no, like I think you have to have a permit to do that, but I will find out from Scott. I hope if he's watching, maybe he'll text me the answer to that question. Okay. So different parts of the Department of Insurance do inspections, like the fire marshal's office. They do fireworks inspections. They do fire hazard inspections. They also investigate fires, and they have increased the number of inspections that they do each year. The fire investigations by property types have been pretty steady for each year. The Department of Insurance also has a division that investigates insurance fraud. And they had, during the sunset review period, 1,077 fraud cases. Of those, only 70 are inactive, and that just means that they are pending the receipt of additional information before they can be closed. 2 were referred to the fire marshal, and 88 are pending, so they seem pretty involved in investigating insurance fraud. The fire marshal also has the ability to arrest people if they think that they have done something that makes a fire. They can't do that. They, those amounts are on page 30. They haven't arrested as many people. And there are details included in Appendix 4 of the report that gives details of that. The complaints come in online. They have to be on a form that is the department sets. The department acknowledges all complaints. They refer to their legal department and go through the status that people can have a hearing. It's very standard in the complaint process. Most of it is all handled in-house since they have a legal division. They had 5,987 complaints come in during the period. Their average time to resolve complaints was 28 business days, and they only had 1 pending as of June 9th, 2023.
Yeah, that's impressive, but I want you, if you don't mind repeating that. So if they had how many cases or
5,987 complaints were filed.
And then all of those had hearings?
No, not all of them necessarily go to a hearing.
Okay, so if they do go to a hearing, you had, what was the average time?
The average time to resolve the complaints was 28 business days.
All right, thank you.
And so they also separated out their pre-need complaints. And once again, pre-need is moving to the Funeral Services Board. But they had 145 complaints of that during the review period. 141 were resolved, and those were done within 60 business days. The Department of Insurance has multiple funds. They are all within the Treasury. The operating funds are the Special Examination Revolving Fund, the Department of Insurance Fund, the State Fire Marshal's Fund, the Service Contract Revolving Fund, the Fraud Unit Fund. The Department of Insurance also oversees statutory deposits that are required of certain insurance companies that write policies in Alabama. Balances are held in trust for those. And then there are also receivership funds that are under the department's purview. There's an insurance premium tax fund where the department collects and distributes insurance premium tax from companies authorized to transact insurance business in Alabama, but no part of this money is available for use by the department. That money is dispersed to the general fund, the education trust fund, and the Alabama Special Mental Health Trust Fund. The distributions from that fund are on page 37. The fee schedule starts on page 38 for all of the different fees that are assessed by the Department of Insurance, and it goes through page 50. There were some increase in fees effective October of 2021, and you can see that reflected in some of the revenues in these accounts. The Special Examination Revolving Fund is on page 51. This accounts for the receipts and disbursements associated with the operations of the Insurance Examiners Division and some expenses associated with the administration of insolvent insurance placed under the control of the Receivership Division. At the end of fiscal year 22, the unobligated cash balance was $3.1 million. The State Fire Marshal's Fund accounts for some receipts and disbursements associated with the operations of the State Fire Marshal's Office. The unexpended balance of this fund is retained at the end of the fiscal year. Its unobligated cash balance at the end of fiscal year 22 was $1.5 million. The Department of Insurance Fund is on page 55. And it accounts for receipts and disbursements associated with the general operations of the department, including portions of the State Fire Marshal's Office. The unencumbered and unexpended balance at the end of the fiscal year in excess of 25% of the amount appropriated for that fiscal year must be transferred to the State General Fund. And the balance in this fund, the unobligated cash balance after the transfers, was $12 million, $12.2 million at the end of fiscal year 22.
Did we say that the balance in those unobligated, there is no requirement, no statutory requirement for its usage? It just is what it is.
Right. Well, the insurance fund to 25% above the appropriations goes back to the general fund, but that's it.
Okay.
And there was one act in 2022 that required a specific distribution to the Strengthen Alabama Homes Fund. Otherwise, they are retained by the department.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The Service Contract Revolving Fund accounts for the receipts and disbursements associated with service providers. The unexpended balance at the end of the fiscal year remains for this fund. The Reduced Cigarette Ignition Propensity Standards and Firefighter Protection Act Fund is on page 58. It has an unobligated cash balance of $180,000. This accounts for receipts and disbursements associated with the fire safety and prevention programs in the State Fire Marshal's Office. The Fraud Unit Fund is next. It accounts for the receipts and disbursements associated with providing the administrative personnel, legal counsel, support, everything for doing their fraud investigations. These funds are retained at the end of the fiscal year. It has an unobligated cash balance of $288,000. I promise we're almost through them. They have a lot. Strengthen Alabama Homes Fund has $7.2 million in it at the end of fiscal year 22, and it is the receipts and disbursements associated with this program, and they keep those funds at the end of the year. And then we have the professional services for those operating funds that are available. If you guys have any questions on those. That's it. That's a big one, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate your report. Members, questions or comments? All right, very well.
I would like to say one thing. It is impressive that it's this large of an operation with no significant issues. That's impressive. That's a lot of stuff going on in a lot of different circles that they manage very well. The Strengthen Alabama Homes Fund, that one does intrigue me some. I wasn't aware of that. I did read a little bit about what it's been used for. I'd be curious to know, just because it's new to me, what the process is, how they get direction, and I know I can ask that tomorrow, but how they get direction on where to send the funds. Is it application and then competitive or what? But that's an interesting fund, and
I think that's all on the coast. If
is it all coast?
No, never mind.
It's statewide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, a lot of the homes are from the coast that apply.
So is it application like you just apply and then it's competitive from there?
You apply, you go to the website. They have a fund for a certain amount that they can use. Once that fund is up, then they're done. They've done a tremendous job doing a lot of homes a penny in saves us a pound for having to buy this later on. So I must commend the Strength in Alabama Homes.
Yeah, and I was commending. I just was curious about it, a little more about it.
I think they've crossed the 100,000 mark on roofs.
Wow.
We attended.
Roofs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has made a significant, and we're the leading state in the nation
Yeah.
for the certified roofs or fortified roofs. But I am interested to know, reserve for year-end obligations under the Strengthen Alabama Homes Fund. Can you explain to me a little bit more about how they come up with that number? And that's on page 61. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't know what all makes up that number, Representative Wilcox, but I can get that information for you.
Yeah, because I know they run out of, as soon as the applications go up, you have to stay up to midnight according to everybody now applying.
Yep.
And then by 5 a.m., all the money's gone. So I'm very much interested in this program and how it's administered and how they come up with the reserves for the year-end obligations.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And there is no restriction there's no statutory requirement for the reserve balance to be any number.
Right.
It could be 1 or 0 or 7 million.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, members, any more questions, comments, concerns?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Just a quick question. I noticed that on page 62, accounting and actuarial services have increased significantly, and I'm just curious to know, is that because of the increase of natural disasters, maybe? 62 compared to F1 2019 to.
Okay, let me get to that. I gotta find it in the other book. 1 second, I'm sorry. Can I get you an answer on that of why it's gone up so much? And see, I can look at what I can do is pull those invoices and see what they're billing for. Okay.
We'll let y'all know tomorrow.
Yes.
All right, any other questions, comments, concerns? If not, we'll move along. Thank you, Dixie. Next up is Public Service Commission. Floor is all yours, Dixie.
Stay. All right. Next up, we have the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission became the Public Service Commission in 1915. It evolved from the Railroad Commission that was created in 1881. They regulate public utilities and the interstate rates and services of transportation companies conducting business in this state. They have had multiple items of legislation passed since the last sunset review. Those are provided for you. There are 3 members of this commission, the president and 2 associates. They are compensated. Their salaries are listed on page 3. The president is paid $115,337 each year, and the 2 places, place 1 and place 2, are paid $107,000 each year. Those salaries are set by statute. The administrator is John Garner. He's the executive director and a chief administrative law judge. He is appointed by the commission with a salary of $166,000. They have 64 employees. They employ 4 attorneys that are all in-house, 3 administrative law judges, and 1 attorney 3. There are 5 funds housed in the state treasury. They receive their funds from registration, inspection fees, and penalties collected from regulated entities. They also have dual-party relay program fees that are collected from telephone companies. There are required distributions that are usually through the Appropriations Act. It routinely require the commission to transfer funds from the operating account to the state general fund, and we list how much those transfers have been during the sunset review period. Unused funds, the commission retains unspent and unencumbered funds at the end of the fiscal year that are not required to be distributed. They have licensees as of September 30th, 2022, 16,440. They have one significant issue. It has to do with the surveys that we sent out. A letter was sent to 100 gas pipeline safety companies and 100 telecommunication companies requesting participation in a survey. 23 gas pipeline safety companies and 5 telecommunication companies responded. 10 out of the 23 gas pipeline safety companies think that some of the commission's laws, rules, or policies are unnecessary restriction on their profession. 8 of the 23 gas line pipeline safety companies, or 35%, expressed concerns with the ability to hire and retain skilled employees and employee retention. 26% of gas pipeline safety companies feel the commission should complete a cost analysis before implementing any new rules and regulations. And 11 of the 28 gas pipeline safety companies and telecommunications companies think that the commission's rules are unnecessary and cumbersome regarding costs and believe the most significant issue facing their profession are outdated and changing regulations. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Since I've been elected, I get gas line pipeline safety issues about every 2 weeks in the mail. I don't recall ever getting these things before I was elected, so that's just a nuance to me. Who do they send those gas line pipeline safety notices to?
That would be a question for the board.
There's an awful lot of them. Okay. And like I said, I'm just struck that I never got them before I got elected, so I'd just like to ask them about that tomorrow. No, it was before I got on this committee. The day I got elected, I started getting one every 2 weeks. Invitations to the meetings.
Oh. The Public Service Commission has multiple divisions. They have an administrative division, a legal division, an electricity policy division, a utility services division, utility enforcement division, gas pipeline safety division, and a dual party relay program. They have their personnel is shown on page 15. They have had the number of licensees has increased. The performance characteristics are on page 17. They had 12,588 licensees in 2019. They have 16,000 now. The biggest increases were in their UCR registrants and their interstate motor carriers went down a little bit, but they have steadily grown. We're on page 17. They do perform 4 types of inspections at the Public Service Commission. They do for water and wastewater inspections. They have annual reviews, tariff charges. They have people who investigate complaints. They do records inspections. There are also gas pipeline inspections performed. The results of those inspections start on page 20. It shows how much time is spent, how many in-person days are spent on these inspections. There have been increased inspections for pipeline safety and decreased violations over the course of our sunset review period. That's on page 21. There are also inspections done related to, sorry, I lost my words, transportation network companies. These are things like Uber and Lyft. The commission regulates these and offer an online platform for private citizens to provide ride-sharing opportunities to the public using their own personal vehicles, and the staff performs annual inspections of records to ensure they follow commission rules, and they investigate complaints against the companies or the drivers. I thought that was pretty nice to know. That was something new I learned. They also do perform railroad inspections. Those are on page 23. The complaint handling process is pretty standard. They can receive complaints by phone, email, letter, online, or in person. The complainant is notified that their complaint's been received. Excuse me, a formal complaint is reviewed by the executive director, commission attorney, and a commission member. They will investigate. The board does not offer negotiated settlements, but does offer agreements through mediation. Complainants are notified of the resolution of their complaint in the same manner in which it was received. Complaints that are made in person are done by, they get their notification by telephone. They received 3,246 complaints during the sunset review period. They resolved 3,245 of those, and the average time to resolve them was 3 days.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to railroad inspections, and I'm looking, and one of the things says hazardous material routes. Do they, I mean, is there a connection with them and EPA? Because this is news to me. A lot of people probably didn't know that the PSC inspected those types of things. I would dare say that probably with this whole thing with the poop train and everything else that was going on, they were not even contacted. And you have a lot of, I know in North Birmingham community that I represent, there's a lot of toxic things that whole community is an environmental waste area, and just a lot of trains go through there. Can you tell me how the relationship here, because this is my first time hearing of PSC having a hand in this, or certainly a regulatory.
I mean, I can tell you about the inspections that they perform, but how they're related may be a better question for the board tomorrow.
So, yeah, and I'd like to know exactly what do they do when it says hazardous route inspection. So what does that mean? You know, we just come out and designate, say, oh, yeah, that's what it is. Do they do anything about it?
I mean, it says that they inspect hazmat cars, too. So they may be able to offer you more.
Yeah, what they do, you'll see them, they look like state troopers on the highway, or I guess, and they have vehicles where they specifically will inspect their hazmat. So if a truck's going down the road and doesn't have their hazardous materials marking for what they're carrying, that'd be a violation. Then I would assume they do the same thing on the rail cars. The rail cars have to have the proper indications of what they're carrying.
That was a big issue with environmental groups, and we've had that issue, just been an ongoing thing with all the trains and what's going through. So PSC, now we know your contact.
And then could I ask something on page 21? The gas pipeline inspections, they've got something to be carried over to the next calendar year. I've never really seen that on any reports. So is that common? Have I just picked up on that?
This is the first time we've seen it, the probable violations, and it's just, that's how it was reported to us, that some of the numbers could be carryover from the previous year.
Okay, Mr. Numbers, I'd like for you to double check all that. Representative, our number. Pay attention over there. I've just never seen on page 21 where they've kind of carried over to the next calendar year. And those numbers are all adding up when you look into their next year.
I mean, the number of inspections.
21. It's page 21. The gas pipeline inspections. I've never noticed that anybody has ever said to be carried over to the next calendar year. I've never seen a topic for that. And I was just hoping somebody had done the math to make sure that those weren't lost. I'm not the math person.
Yeah.
We'll check on that.
What do they do, just keep adding up and carrying them over?
It's not, those are just the number of inspections that they reported, and I think some of them are just crossing, the probable violations are crossing years. That's what it means. It's not, it's, right. It's just that the violation may be found in one year and it may not be completed or carried over until the next year, and so some of the numbers, because then they have violations found during the current year right under that. So some may be carryover from previous years.
Okay, thanks. I hope they just come and explain that to me tomorrow further.
Okay. The financial information for this board starts on page 28. They have a special revenue fund, number 325. This is what accounts for all the operations of the gas pipeline safety program. And then they have an operations fund for the commission that operates, I lost my words. It accounts for everything except the gas pipeline safety program. So they have two operating funds. They have the state dual party relay fund that accounts for funds received from the local exchange companies that are part of the dual party relay system. The transportation network companies fees, this is the local shares. This sent back, this fund accounts for funds received from transportation network companies. This is distributed back out to Alabama cities and counties. And then there is the dual party relay bank account. This account is not in the treasury. It contains the remainder of funds associated with the dual party relay program pursuant to Act 567 of the Acts of Alabama of 2011. Union Bank of Switzerland, UBS, serves as the trustee of the fund. The net assets as of June 30th, 2023 were $3.5 million. It is audited annually. There was a contract for the fiscal year 2022 audit that went through contract review last month to get them caught up on their audits. Page 29 starts the schedule of fees. The first operating fund, the Public Service Commission's operating fund, is on page 31. At the end of fiscal year 2022, they have an unobligated cash balance of $752,000. That includes the required distributions to the general fund. The second operating fund can be found on 33. And at the end of fiscal year 22, they have an unobligated cash balance of $1.3 million. The dual party relay fund that is held in the state treasury is on page 35. There are no revenues shown for fiscal year 22 in this fund because the board can and has suspended collecting that fee because it is not needed. That is part of what they are allowed to do. They can say, if we need the money, we collect it, but if we don't need the money, we're not going to charge it. And so they stop charging it because they have enough money to sustain the operations. At the bottom of page 35 is the Transportation Network Company, the local share fund. You can see everything that goes into this fund is distributed back out to cities and counties. And then on page 36 is the...
Question before you go. I'm looking at 34, operation and receipts for gas pipeline. It seems like we're going to flip them, spending more out. Are they operating at a deficit?
They did during this year. This was the only year that they did. They expended $1.4 million and only brought in $1.359. They had increases in personnel costs. They had, that's their costs and the benefits. They also had an increase in their transportation equipment operations. And they just...
Okay.
But their revenue stayed pretty steady. They had slight dips in their federal operating reimbursements, but it was a slight operating deficit in that year.
Just something historically with that. So in the state general fund, PSC actually transfers money. They're one of the very, very few agencies that transfers money into the general fund every year. And those general fund budget chairmen decide what that is. That's under their purview. And if my memory serves me correct from when I used to do that, it was around $10 million. And so I think that they have now asked that that be lessened some, and so it looks like more of a deficit, but it's not really a deficit because they're contributing money to the general fund, which they're not statutorily required to do. So back when Senator Pittman was there, he would always say they're a giver. They're not a taker to the general fund. So that kind of messes with the numbers just a little bit for historical purposes for you to understand why it looks like a deficit. Does that make sense?
Looks like they gave to the Hertz.
Okay. After that, we have the professional services charts for you, and then the questionnaires. But that's it on this one.
All right. Members, questions, comments, concerns? All right. Thank you, Dixie. Moving right along. Next up is the Securities Commission.
My pile is getting a little out of control over here. Okay. All right. The Securities Commission was created by Act 1959, 542. The mandated function of this commission is to enforce the laws governing the issuance, sale, and other transactions relative to securities, including licensing and registration of brokers, broker-dealers, agents, investment advisors, and investment advisor representatives, as well as industrial revenue bonds made within or into or from the state of Alabama. Additionally, Act 2017-389, known as the Alabama Monetary Transmission Act, was added to the Commission's authority to regulate and enforce the laws relating to the transmission of monetary value, and this is things like Bitcoin, stored value cards, electronic transmission, all of the electronic transmissions of money, bill payment services, as well as traditional transmission methods such as money orders. This board has 7 members. 3 are ex officio members: the Attorney General, the State Superintendent of Banks, and the State Superintendent of Insurance, or the Commissioner of Insurance. There are 4 other members appointed by the Governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. 2 shall be members of the Alabama Bar Association, and 2 shall be certified public accountants. There is 1 minority member serving on the board. There are no geographical requirements for the board. They are compensated $50 a day for a period not to exceed 60 days. The board members are. The ex officio members shall not be entitled to any extra compensation. The administrator is Amanda Sin. She serves as the director of the commission. Her annual salary is $150,420. The board has 61 employees, and their legal counsel is in-house. They have several attorneys who provide legal counsel for the commission. Their funds are housed within the state treasury. There are 3 funds listed. The first one, the sale of checks license fund. This one's no longer used. It stopped being used as of September 30th, 2019, but it was still part of this sunset. So they have the Securities Commissions Fund and the Industrial Revenue Bond Fund. The required distributions. All monies accruing to or collected by or through the Securities Commission shall be deposited when collected into the state treasury to the credit of the state general fund unless otherwise provided by law. And there are a lot of fees that are collected that are not straight to the general fund. The schedule of fees dictates which money goes where. Annual appropriation acts for fiscal years 2018 through 2022 required the commission to transfer some amounts to the general fund. As of June 30th, 2023, the commission had 205,990 licensees. You do have to pass some exams to obtain licensure by this commission. We have presented pass-fail data for the Series 63, Series 65, and Series 66 examinations, and these are for different types of investment advisors, brokers, those type of things that they have to pass to be able to advise you about your money and invest your money. There is 1 significant issue that was in this report. The commission did not notify the Secretary of State of vacancies occurring as a result of the expiration of 2 members' terms. One of the commission members' terms expired March 27th of 2022, and the other one expired May 1st of 2023. I will say that the commission immediately corrected this upon notification of the issue. We called and said this is a problem, and they asked for help of how to work through the Secretary of State's new website and fix it immediately, and they have all of that documentation in their response, but they were real quick to fix it. Their performance characteristics are on page 14. You can see that the number of licensees that they have are growing. They had 169,000 licensees for fiscal year 19, and in fiscal year 22, they had 203,000 So that's a big increase. Any fines and penalties that are assessed by the commission are paid directly to the state general fund and are not available for the commission's operations. The commission performs audits of the advisors and broker dealers and money transmitters that they do license. The number of audits that they conduct has increased each year of the Sunset Review. Those are on page 15. They have a complaint handling process that does allow for anonymous complaints. Complaints can be initiated by any person, including commission members and staff. There is a standard form, but it's not required to be used. They have two types of complaints that they track. They have inquiries and then they have investigations. So it usually it starts as an inquiry, and then if it's warranted, it becomes an investigation. And so they break those two out. They had 590 inquiries during the Sunset Review period. They resolved 582. The average time was 43 business days. The investigations take a little longer just because by nature an investigation just takes a little bit longer, but they had 250 of those during the period. 165 were resolved. The average time to resolve was 258 business days. They, of course, have different ways that they resolve their complaints. Those are on page 18. The financials are, like I said, they have 3 funds that are shown in here. The first fund, the Sale of Checks Fund, as of September 30th, 2019. This is no longer in use. Any fees that were put into this fund are now deposited into the state general fund, so they mainly operate from the Alabama Securities Commission Fund that receives initial and renewal registration fees for investment advisors and investment advisor representatives. This fund may be drawn upon by the commission for its use in its administration, and they retain the year-end balances. They also have the Industrial Revenue Bond Fund. It is used to collect filing fees associated with the issuance of certificates of notification of industrial revenue bonds, and these funds may be withdrawn by the director for the use of the commission and in its administration also, and those funds are also retained at year-end. The fee schedule starts on page 20. And it is showing you the fees are paid directly into the general fund, and then it shows which ones go to the Alabama Securities Commission's fund. So we separated those out for you. On page 22, you'll see that the last expenditure from the Securities Commission Sale of Checks and License Fund was in 2019, and then it has not been used since. So this fund also is required by the Appropriations Act to send money to the general fund. It's around $1 million a year. That's included on page 23 in the receipts and disbursements. These balances are growing in this account about $3 million each year. Their unobligated cash balances. At the end of fiscal year 22, they had $26,675,902.82.
If their revenues have gone up, why did their disbursements go down to the general fund?
That is written into the Appropriations Act, that amount. So that would be a question for the legislature.
Okay.
And there is no distinction for what happens in they retain their reserves.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's grown by 10,000 or 10 million in 4 years.
Yes. The Industrial Revenue Bond Fund is on page 25. Its unobligated cash balance at the end of fiscal year 22 is $11,784. There's not a lot of activity. They don't have any expenditures coming out except for personnel costs in 2019. It's a very small fund. That's all I have for this one.
Members, any questions, comments, concerns? All right, thank you, Dixie.
Okay.
Next up is the Alabama Athletic Commission.
All right, so with the start of this one, the Alabama Athletic Commission is the first of the one-year rollover reviews. And so traditionally, when our department does a one-year rollover review of an agency, we go in and we look at what the issues were in the prior examination. We will look at anything that was in the prior legal compliance examination or the sunset review and see if the problems have been fixed or if they're still there. And we will also look into any issues that have been brought to light that would happen in compiling the profile and kind of information for the sunset report or anything that we've been notified of. So that's standard across all of these.
Not a wholesale.
Not a full set of things, so they'll be a lot smaller.
Right, and that's true with all of the remaining boards that we're going to review.
So the last ones that we have, all of these are one-year rollovers.
Okay.
So they don't have the financial reports in them?
No, ma'am.
Okay, because I haven't marked every one. I'm like, why isn't there a financial report?
Right, we don't do that. So if the significant issue that was prior to it had been a financial issue, we would have included that. So if it was that, like we had one earlier in the year where they weren't sending enough money to the general fund based on their obligations at the end of the year, if we looked at that in a one-year rollover, we would pull the financial information and present it for that year, that 1 year. But so the reason that it's not included is because there weren't significant issues directly related to the finances. Okay. So the first one is the Alabama Athletic Commission. We do produce the profile tables for you guys to give you some background information on all of these. This commission has changed names a lot starting in 2009, but it is now called the Alabama Athletic Commission based on an act in 2021. And it is comprised of 6 members, 2 appointed by the governor, 2 by the Alabama Athletes Agents Commission, 1 by the Speaker of the House, 1 by the President of the Senate, and 1 by the President Pro Tem of the Senate. There are 3 minority members serving. There's no geographical representation requirement. Members do not receive any compensation. The administrator of the commission contracts with Paris Enterprises to perform these services. John Paris, the president of Paris Enterprises, serves as the commission's executive director. There's a current emergency contract in the amount of $7,000 a month plus costs. This contract began July 27th of 2023 and will expire on September 30th of 2023. There was only 1 previous emergency contract before this. The emergency contract had been extended. There was an RFP completed and awarded. However, the contract has not come through contract review yet. It had some issues and was rejected, so they have done an RFP and are working through the process. They do not have any employees. They receive legal counsel from Matt Bledsoe, a Deputy Attorney General with the Attorney General's office. Their funds are housed in the state treasury. They do not have any required distributions, and they retain their funds at the end of the year. As of July 24th of 2023, they had 1,406 licensees, and these are everything from kickboxers to referees, judges, promoters, boxers. These are the type of licensees.
Bare knuckle boxers.
That's true.
I will note that if I remember correctly, last year there was only 1 person who had a license, and I thought I'll go get my license and I'll be the second best bare knuckle brawler. Now I'll be the 4th if I get a license.
Well, now there's 3.
Yeah.
So.
Our next committee meeting needs to be at that point.
There were no new significant issues with this commission. There was 1 brought forward dealing with licensees that were surveyed, and it was partially resolved. 18 of the 100 licensees that responded to our request to participate, 14 of them said that they believe some of the commission's laws, rules, or policies are an unnecessary restriction on the practice of their profession, and 9 of the 18 respondents think that the regulation of their profession by the commission is unnecessary.
Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Anything else you have, Dixie, on them? Yes, sir.
Is this the same board that the Secretary of State was kind of responsible for, or is that a different athletic board?
think that's the Athlete Agents Commission that you're thinking.
Okay, thank you.
And they don't have any complaints? They handle 0 complaints a year?
So we also only send surveys that are related to the prior significant issues. That's what we've traditionally done. Now, you guys are welcome to ask us to make changes to that process, but so they didn't have a prior significant issue that dealt with anything from complainants, so we didn't survey complainants this time for the 1-year rollover.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next up is Licensing Board for General Contractors. Dixie, all yours. Oh, is it? Okay, bail bonds.
I was like, maybe my folders are out of order.
No, I did it.
No, here's.
All right, the Alabama Professional Bail Bonding Board was established by Act Number 2019-409. They license and regulate professional bail and surety companies, bail bondsmen, surety bondsmen, and recovery agents. There are 9 members appointed by the governor from a list of nominees from the Alabama Bail Bond Association on this board. 7 are to be professional bail bondsmen. 1 is a serving circuit district or municipal court judge, and 1 circuit or municipal court clerk. There's 1 minority member serving. The 7 professional bail bondsmen are supposed to come from each of the 7 congressional districts of the state. These board members are only paid travel and per diem. They don't have any other compensation. So this board has entered into 5 emergency contracts since March 13th of 2020. Currently, the board is operating under its 2nd emergency contract with Smith Warren Management Services to provide administrative services and office space. Keith Warren serves as the executive director. Contract that was effective was from October 1, 2022 to September 30, 2023. So they had entered into a 3rd emergency contract, but they also did the RFP process, and they have had a contract awarded to Smith Warren. It has not been submitted through contract review as of yesterday. So, but they have worked on the process, and the 3rd emergency contract that they entered into, the CPO approved it and extended it through the end of the calendar year or the governor's signature. Their next meeting is not scheduled until December 1st, but currently they're under an emergency.
Next contract review meeting?
No, the next board meeting.
Okay.
So per the CPO, it was awarded on August 21st to Smith Warren, but we haven't seen a contract yet.
Okay.
They have 1 part-time state employee. Their legal counsel is Tara Hetzel with the State Attorney General's office. Their funds are within the Treasury, and they come from licensure fees, late fees, fines, continuing education, and certificate fees. As of the end of August, they have 893 licensees. Their significant issues begin on page 6. They have 1 new significant issue. 18 payments made to Smith Warren Management Services were reviewed. Supporting documentation for these payments revealed that 17 of the invoices from Smith Warren Management Services for administrative services were submitted and paid by the board prior to services actually being rendered. These invoices were submitted at the beginning of the month for which services were being billed. The invoices were then paid before the end of that same month. This is a violation of Section 93 of the Constitution. It also violates Finance's Fiscal Policies and Procedures Manual.
Is this one of those that we've had in other boards?
Yes.
And I think that's been corrected. I think at least in other cases, there had been some information that came down from what department pays that?
The
Comptroller's office.
Right,
They were
everybody has
actually-
been notified that this is an issue and they're supposed to be working to
Okay.
fix it and make it better.
Okay.
But once we found it in one, we made sure we checked everywhere. The next are prior significant issues. Oh,
Is this a carryover and they have not had an opportunity to,
no, ma'am, this is new.
out of all the things that went on the last meeting?
This is for professional bail bonds. Yes, ma'am. Okay. The prior significant issues, the first one is dealing with licensees in our survey. It was partially resolved This is prior significant issue 2022-03. And a request was sent to 100 licensees to participate in a survey, and 13 licensees responded. 54% indicated that they are not adequately informed by the board of changes to the board's policies, rules, and laws. The board's website does have the current statutes and administrative rules, and currently has the board's meetings. Additionally, 7 of the 13 licensees responding indicated that they do not think that the regulation of their profession by the board is necessary to protect public welfare. And finally, they indicated that they do not consider mandatory continuing education necessary for the competent practice of their profession. Next, we have a significant issue regarding the board issuing licenses to applicants that completed an instructional course conducted by an education provider but not passing an examination approved by the board. The code states that a professional bail bondsman, professional surety bondsman, or recovery agent commencing business in any judicial circuit of this state on or after June 1st, 2020 shall attend a 16-hour instructional course conducted by an education provider approved by the board and pass an examination approved by the board and administered by an education provider approved by the board. This was reported as significant issue 2022-07 and also finding 2021-14 in their legal compliance audit. Currently, it is unresolved. The board continued to issue licenses to applicants who have completed the instructional course but have not passed an educational exam approved by the board. However, according to the executive director, at the end of July, the board is finalizing the examination.
Representative Simpson has at least a question.
I do, and I try to be nice on these things. So you're saying there was a legal finding in 2021 that says the board should not do this as far as issuing license to people that have not passed the exam. Then we have a sunset committee in 2022 that says, hey, board, don't do this as far as issuing licenses to people that have not passed the exam. As of July 29, 2023, the board is still issuing licenses to people that have not passed the exam. What is the point of taking the exam? Why would anybody try to go take the examination if they're not going to do this? The best way I can describe it is the bar. You know, as an attorney, if we're just going to license anybody that doesn't have to take the bar, why would we have the bar as part of it? Why would we have any license? Because what happens is, because this is not the only board in this specific executive director that he has done where they have these provisional licenses and goes through. What happens when somebody's an electrical contractor and their house burns down because they haven't passed the examination, but we're issuing licenses to allow these people to come through? What happens when we go through this process when the statute clearly says you have to take an exam and they continue to not pursue the statute, no matter how many times they've been told legally in 2021 or in the sunset in 2022, and here we are in 2023 with them continuing to issue licenses without the examination.
They have to pay a fee to take the test, don't they? Do they not?
Senator Coleman Madison, do they?
They have to pay a fee to take the test?
I don't believe so.
That's Alabama.
Senator Kelly.
Under the same oversight in another organization as well, on the record, the individuals asked about continuing to issue licenses that weren't permitted by law since I think it was 2014 or so, and basically kept doing it every year. And I acknowledged, and he acknowledged that yes, he knew that was against the law, and continued to do it every year since. So apparently there's a refusal to acknowledge that pattern of behavior needs to stop, and someone is above the law is the only thing that the actions speak to me. In this particular case, this is a different organization, but it's the same individual that is making these actions. So I'm with Representative there. Why do we keep on? Enough's enough.
Members? Dixie.
All right, the next significant issue deals with the board's enrollment in the Federal Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements Program, the SAVE program. It is used to verify documentation presented by non-citizen applicants. And the board had also not enrolled in E-Verify. That was a significant issue that was reported in 2022. It was also reported as a finding in 2021. This has been partially resolved. The board has completed its enrollment in E-Verify. However, while the board has applied for enrollment in the SAVE program, the enrollment process was not complete as of August 30th. Next, we have prior significant issue 2022-09. The board adopted administrative rules to require all employees that are engaged in the performance of clerical, stenographic, investigative, or administrative or other duties of a professional bail bond company or professional surety company who has contact with the public to obtain a bail bond license. According to Code Section 1513-202A, only individuals that hold himself or herself out to the public as a professional bondsman or a professional surety bondsman or operate as a recovery agent are required to obtain a license from the board. This was also reported as finding 2021-13 in the board's most recent legal compliance examination. This is also considered to be unresolved. Although the board updated the definition of an employee in its administrative rules, the board statutes say that the only individuals that are to be licensed are those that hold himself or herself out to the public as a professional bondsman or professional surety bondsman or operate as a recovery agent are required to obtain a license. And their rules define an employee as any individual engaged in the performance of clerical, stenographic, investigative, administrative, or other duties.
So we're saying that, are we saying that the people who work in the office,
they have to get a license?
They have to get a license, and they have to be bonded?
According to their rules.
Yeah, the law doesn't
But the
say
law
that.
doesn't.
Their rules did.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
How much are the license?
Somebody's going to text me and tell me that because I am unsure at the moment. She's looking it up right now.
Well, I mean, I just think it's kind of unfair to ask somebody that works in the office.
And it still happened. And I looked up one for a completely different project the other day, and it was the lady who works the front, and she had a license on file. So that's still happening.
Okay. So is she being paid a salary but commensurate with that?
I don't know that.
Okay, I know that's that.
And then we don't know whether the company paid it for them or if they had to pay it themselves.
I don't know. I just happened to be looking it up.
So that's be like saying the people that work in somebody's insurance office, even the people that answer the phone would have to be insurance agents.
The rule does say clerical duties.
Right. So if you work in a CPA's office, you'd have to pass the CPA. All righty. I got some.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question to Ms. Riddle? What happens if we vote to sunset a board?
It depends on what the language says, but the board would just, if you say it is sunsetted, it will just go away. In some instances, you'll say it's sunsetted and reconstitute the board and set out how you want to do that and set it up. They've done it different ways. But if you just say it's sunsetted, it'll go away, and then there will be no regulation of that occupation.
So we would need to say sunset and reconstituted.
If that's what you want to do, and then you need to, yes, unless if you just went away, you're going to have to deal with all the.
That's what I was wondering, because
property
people are
and-
still going to need to bail out. So
Yes.
we don't want to, hurt the people that are trying to bail out of prison, because the board will comply with what we've told them to do. But we do have an option to sunset with the direction of reconstituting.
Right, right.
But what would be the effective date of that sunset?
I would advise to do it almost immediately.
But
Like-
but the sunset would actually take effect by legislative session.
Correct. It has to be done by bill.
Right. So it would, the committee itself wouldn't sunset. It would have to be voted on by the legislature. Not, am I correct in that the actual sunsetting of the board would not take effect until the legislature voted for it?
Correct.
And the reestablishment would be the same process preferably at the same time.
Yes. So I would do it in the same bill just to be safe.
People received bonds before 2019, and this board was only established in 2019.
Well, that's what I thought. I mean, that's what I'm there. I just want to make sure that the general public is, if we decide to do something to where they won't listen to us. So if we decide to do something to the board where the board is no longer there, the general public won't feel any repercussions as far as not being able to bond out of prison or not being able to go through that process.
I think this goes beyond this. It's not just necessarily this particular board. There's a pattern behavior there that's got to be addressed. or lack of respect for the process. And so just wasn't familiar with the mechanism. Thank you.
The answer to the question of how much the licenses cost, the application and license fee is $125. The apprentice license is $50. A company license is $50. The background check is $38.25. A late renewal is $125, and an ID card is $10.
So that secretary's license is more than the company's license?
Yes. According to this, what we have. Right.
Okay. Dixie.
Okay. Prior significant issue 2022-11 was that the board adopted administrative rules to charge the following fees that were not authorized by statute: a change of information fee, a replacement license fee, a license verification fee, and a reinstatement fee. This is partially resolved. Although the board amended their rules regarding these fees, the rules still reflect verbiage for the fees related to a replacement license and license verification fees.
Let me ask you this, and there's an AG opinion that's referenced from 1987 on one of the previous different from today boards. I thought I remembered an AG opinion. Would that, I don't remember which board it was, from July. Would that have been the same AG's opinion? Because
Yes,
that
when we
seems
use this
pretty
one a lot.
general.
Yes, we use the surface mining AG opinion a lot when they are doing that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Prior significant issue 2022-12, the Code of Alabama, Section 1513-217H states that the board may set fees not to exceed maximum amounts set by law. The board has not adopted an administrative rule to set fee amounts for the following licenses. So this just means it's not in their rules. For the apprentice license, the continuing education certification fee, initial license fees, renewal fees, and I know that you guys heard me just read off the fees. This is that it is not set in their rules. So they have the fees, but their rules don't reflect that these are the fees.
It was a fee for $1,000 if you made a false statement to the board. Is that standard in any of the other boards that we've reviewed? That's page 19, section 15-13-214. I just don't know that I've ever seen that fee.
Making a false statement to the board shall be punished. You know what, Karen?
I never,
Right here.
19, page 19, 15-13.
I don't ever recall seeing that on any other board.
$1,000.
Right. Is Karen may,
I don't recall ever seeing that, but it's part of their statutes. Like you said, yeah, this is their law. Right?
Law. Okay, it's not one of their rulemaking.
no ma'am, this is their statutes.
All right, thanks.
All right, prior finding 2021-12, the board did not comply with requirements of the Open Meetings Act when convening for an executive session during a board meeting. Prior to calling the executive session, the presiding officer did not state whether the body would reconvene after the executive session, and if so, the approximate time the body would reconvene in open session. As a result, members of the public would not know if the board planned on returning to the open meeting. We could not determine whether or not this finding had been resolved during the sunset review because the board did not go into any executive sessions during the period of our review. So this will be reevaluated in the board's next legal compliance examination.
Members, any questions, comments, concerns? All right, moving right along. Am I correct? The licensing board for general contractors.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make one
Yes,
comment?
ma'am.
I'm just looking at, on page 10, board member number 4, when they asked about significant issues facing the board. So they says the biggest issue is the court system not knowing about the board. That's kind of odd. So we have bail bondsmen and recovery agents still out working without a license. This was from a board member, so I'm hoping somebody can address or explain.
Yeah, like how many investigators do they have and stuff like that? Is that what you're asking? How many investigations they do?
There's a relationship with the court, and since they have no problem, so the court don't know that they're there. Again, are they working without a license? And that's what he's saying.
I guess, and I'm just purely a guess, it would be recovery agents rather than the actual bail bond companies, but that'll be something I guess we can talk about tomorrow too. All right. Licensing Board of General Contractors.
Okay, the General Contractors Board was established by Act Number 1935-297 to license and regulate the practice of contracting for commercial, industrial construction costing more than $50,000, as well as the construction, repair, or renovation of any swimming pool in the state of Alabama costing more than $5,000. There was a new act passed during this last legislative session that exempted routine landscape maintenance work from the practice of general contracting. There are 5 members of this board appointed by the governor. The board members are compensated $200 a day. Their administrator is Tiffany Lovelace. She has an annual salary of $93,921.60. They have 15 employees. Their legal counsel is provided by the Attorney General's office. They have one fund that is housed in the state treasury. They are required to send money back to the state general fund. The board, any funds remaining in the state treasury to the credit of the board at the end of the year shall be paid to the general fund of the state on or before January 15th in the next year. The board does have the right to retain a sum of not in excess of 33% of its budget of the previous fiscal year to meet any emergency that may arise, and they did make required distributions. They also send money, an amount of $100 from the fees required for the application and renewal of certification and registration of general contractors, an amount of $50 from subcontractors and $100 from general contractors shall be distributed by the board to all accredited public institutions of higher education offering American Council for Construction Education courses in building science, and to all higher education institutions, public ones that offer courses in building science, which are in the candidate status for the Council for Construction Education. So they are required to give out part of the fees to schools. The board retains the unused balances after the required distributions. As of June 26, 2023, they had 9,624 licensees. They are required to take exams. They are computerized and administered and scored by PSI Examination Services. The examination fee is paid to the provider. We have the examination statistics for fiscal year 22. The board does not have access to the examination pass-fail rates based on the educational institutions that attended. The board had no new significant issues. The only prior significant issue that came forward had to do with surveys. In the last sunset audit, 10 of the 17 general contractor licensees and 4 of the subcontractor licensees responding to the survey stated that the rising costs of fuel and materials are the most significant issues facing their profession. 5 general contractors and 3 subcontractors mentioned a workforce shortage. So this is kind of partially resolved. The request was sent to 100 general contractor licensees and 100 subcontractor licensees. 18 general contractors responded and 10 subcontractors responded, and a combined 10 of the 28 respondents, or 35%, expressed continued concerns regarding personnel issues, including the availability of both skilled and unskilled labor, an aging workforce, and finding qualified employees.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. On some of the subcontractor licensee questionnaires, it's saying that they can't renew online and they don't take credit cards, and you have to provide a cashier's check, and they think that's very obsolete. Is that?
That's true. They do not offer online renewal, and the checks, and that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that may be something that we want to talk to them about, but, you know, the current, or the prior, I guess, significant findings, I've been trying to build a house for 2 years. Materials won't go down, labor doesn't go down. That's not their fault. That's life in Alabama today. That's life in the United States. So I'm not going to hold that against them. I think, you know, it looks like they've got got nothing new and that they're probably due to be put back on a 4-year cycle.
And just for reference point, I'd made this comment, I think earlier, maybe in July, that even though we call those significant findings, it's not that they're unimportant, but I think probably going forward, we need to talk about maybe have a different heading so we don't hold that as response to questionnaires against
Industry problems.
right, a significant finding. They may be significant, but I think they maybe should go under another heading. I'd also point out that last year, I believe one of the reasons that they were set over a year is because of that 2023. That's correct, and I'm hopeful that the passage of that law there's been some corrections to that. So maybe they're not holding those folks doing routine grass cutting around public properties or whatever, and to the extent that they were, hopefully not doing that still. So,
I have a question. When it's one of these holdovers that we're going to prior findings, and people have sent us information that's not to be reviewed, like there's some requirements of the accounting that they're for their license. We've had some communications about that.
On this board?
On this board about what they require from their CPAs to substantiate their financial viability.
I don't know that I was in receipt of that, but had we been, yes, we would have looked at that as part of this.
and I think that's been a pretty recent suggestion about that, and that may be something that we can ask some questions tomorrow whenever they come up about. And I think it would be important to have a better understanding from your side about the CPAs and what their requirements are and some documents that they're requiring. So.
Right, because they are required to produce financial statements, because the general contractors are, because it's set like what kind of license they get. They can't go bid on a job that costs $5 million if they can't afford to do the job. So they do have to submit financial statements in order to be licensed for certain things. But if that had been, we would have looked at it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I'll send that to you. It was just a general inquiry. I just didn't know if that was something we get into, and I sent it to our financial guru. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I make one?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make one comment. I know it wasn't on the prior findings, but the fact that they have a procedure in place for their reserve funds that goes back into the education system for both four-year universities as well as the junior college system, I think is commendable, and I'm proud of the fact that they're investing back into their profession, and I just want to make that point, and I'll make it again tomorrow.
And we said that the reason they were here was because we had some issues with some grass cutting and stuff, and that's been handled. Is that what I heard when I came back in?
I passed that with the bill itself, with the sunset bill last year. I believe it was incorporated, and that was one of those that there were some changes, I believe, either in committee or maybe on the floor. I don't remember exactly, but that was added or modified.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dixie, anything else on this board?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. Members, any other questions on that? All right, moving right along, Board of Massage Therapy. Dixie, all yours.
The Board of Massage Therapy was created by Act Number 1996-661 as a professional therapeutic health service to preserve and protect individual life and health, to promote the public interest and welfare by establishing licensing requirements and assuring public safety. The board licenses massage therapists, massage therapy establishments, massage therapy schools, and massage therapy instructors. There was a law in 2023 that passed during this most recent legislative session. It is included in your report in Appendix 2. This act did require representation on the board from each congressional district, require meetings to be recorded upon request, publication of proposed rules and related proceedings on the board's website to cap certain fees, and it went into effect July 1 of 2023. This board is comprised of 7 members that are appointed by the governor and subject to confirmation by the Senate. The board members are required to serve staggered terms. However, that is not happening. They all expire on September 30th, 2023. That is one of a significant issue or prior finding that has been brought forward. At the time of the sunset review, there was one consumer member serving. The board members are not compensated for serving on the board. The board has an emergency contract with Smith Warren Management Services for the administrative management and logistical support. Keith Warren, president of Smith Warren Management Services, serves as the board's executive director. The current contract amount is for $11,000 per month and expires September 29th of 2023. This is the third emergency contract. An RFP has been completed and awarded. This was done at the September 11th, 2023 meeting. The contract was submitted to the contract review committee, but was pulled by the executive director after he was informed of some errors in the submission of the contract. The board employs one retired state employee and one exempt or unclassified employee, both part-time as inspectors. Their legal counsel is Matt Bledsoe. He is an assistant attorney general with the AG's office. Their funds are housed in the state treasury. I did put out some financial information for this board. It was requested by Representative Underwood yesterday, so I made sure that I made a copy of that for all of you guys to have, since I provided it to Representative Underwood. And can I have this? Yes, you may. It looks like this. Yes. So that is with your packets. They had, as of August 3rd, 2023, 3,179 total licensees. This covers massage therapists, establishment instructors, and schools. Their significant issues begin on page 9. Significant issue 2023-001. This is a new significant issue. The board chairperson did not recuse herself from the adoption of the investigative committee's recommendation for complaints involving an individual and entity in which she has a direct professional interest. During the January 20th, 2023 board meeting, a complaint involving the chairperson's massage therapy school and a complaint involving the co-owner of the chairperson's massage therapy school were presented before the board for review. A motion was made to approve the investigative committee's recommendations of closing the school's complaint due to no probable cause and closing the co-owner's complaint as unfounded. The minutes reflect the motion was unanimously approved. While the board's policy dictates that the chairperson only votes on motions in the instances of a tie, had there been a tie, the chairperson would not have been able to vote on the motion at issue. Therefore, the chairperson should have recused herself from being present or participating in the consideration and adoption of a motion altogether in which she has a direct professional interest. The second significant issue, 2023-002. The board chairperson executed an emergency contract for administrative management and logistical support services with Smith Warren Management Services prior to receiving board approval. The emergency contract in question was dated and acknowledged by the state's chief procurement officer on September 30th, 2022. However, the emergency contract was not presented to the board and subsequently approved until the October 28th, 2022 meeting.
Do the CPOs require something, minutes from the board or acknowledgement from the board?
The letter, the emergency letter that is submitted to the CPO is usually signed by the board chairman, but otherwise there's no.
Okay.
The board paid Smith Warren Management Services a total of $11,000 for administrative management and logistical support prior to entering into an emergency contract. The $11,000 was paid for the month of September 2022. The invoice was dated September 1st, 2022, and it was paid on September 12th, 2022. Additionally, the board paid for services rendered from August 8th, 2022 through August 31st, 2022, for which no emergency contract was in effect. The prior emergency contract expired on August 8th of 2022, and the subsequent emergency contract did not become effective until September 30th, 2022. So the board had 3 emergency contracts. And there was just a lapse in the dates, and they made a payment for services in that lapse. The next significant issue, 24 payments made to Smith Warren Management Services were reviewed. Supporting documentation for 20 of these payments revealed that payments were made and paid by the board before the services were rendered. This is the same issue we've had at other boards where the payments are made at the beginning of the month before the services are fully received by the board, which is a violation of the Constitution as well as the fiscal policies and procedures of the state. Significant issue number 5, the board did not comply with the Open Meetings Act as it relates to conducting meetings via electronic means. A meeting held on August 5th, 2022 had 1 board member attending virtually, and the meeting held on January 20th of 2023 had 2 board members attending virtually. The code states that if a member is participating in a meeting of a governmental body by electronic means as authorized, the governmental body shall ensure that means of access to the electronic communication is published in the same manner as the notice of the meeting is published. A review of the Secretary of State's website did not reveal the board's publishing the means of access to the electronic communication. Additionally, during the May 3rd, 2023 meeting, the board approved a motion to end all virtual meetings of the board. Discontinuing virtual meetings of the board could restrict licensees and interested parties who cannot attend the meetings in person from observing and offering input on the board's officials' actions. Significant issue number 6. The board did not notify the Secretary of State of a vacancy occurring as a result of a resignation in a timely manner. The board member resigned on January 20th, 2023, and the board notified the Secretary of State on March 23rd, 2023, 62 days after the resignation. The code section requires that this notification occur within 15 days of the vacancy. All right, significant issue number 7. The board's administrative rule regarding inspections of massage therapy establishments conflicts with Code Section 344311F. According to the Code Section 344311F, only establishments owned by an individual who is not a resident of Alabama are subject to initial inspection. The board's administrative rule 532-X-3-046 states, upon receipt of an application for a massage therapy establishment license, the board may cause an initial inspection to be made of the site to confirm that the establishment meets the above requirements and is utilized for massage therapy and not for the purposes unlawful under the statutes. The language in the rule appears to potentially subject all massage therapy establishments to an initial inspection, regardless of whether or not the owner is an individual who is not a resident of Alabama. Additionally, neither the emergency rules filed with LSA on July 3rd, 2023, nor the proposed rule changes filed with LSA on July 20th, 2023 rectify this conflict. The next significant issue, the board's administrative rule regarding licensure application approvals conflicts with the Code of Alabama, Section 34436J. Act 2023-490 that was effective July 1st, 2023, amended that same code section to remove the language allowing the board to grant application approval authority to the executive director. However, the board's administrative rule 532X2.022 states, the board as a whole shall hold hearings on written allegations or misconduct or violations of the Act and sit to consider applications for licensure and approval. The board may delegate application approval authority to the executive director when 3 requirements are met: graduation from an approved massage therapy school with a minimum of 650 hours, successful completion of a board-approved examination, and evidence of possession of a liability insurance policy of no less than $1 million. Applicants not meeting those 3 specifications or that contain yes to answers to any of the questions on page 2 of the application must be presented to the board for review at the next regularly scheduled meeting. Neither the emergency rules filed with LSA on July 3rd, 2023, nor the proposed rule changes filed with LSA on July 20th, 2023 rectify the conflict. Further, during the June 28th, 2023 meeting, the board approved an application approval policy that still allows the executive director to approve applications based on certain criteria. Significant issue number 9, the Code of Alabama, Section 344320C, conflicts with the Code of Alabama, Section 344314A5, regarding the registration of massage therapy instructors. Section 344320C states that the board shall register as a massage therapy instructor any applicant who meets all of the following requirements. And the second one is, has filed a completion application prescribed by the board and paid a one-time application fee pursuant to Section 344314. However, Section 344314A states, by rule, the board shall assess and collect the following fees not to exceed $100 to register and renew a registration as a massage therapy instructor. A review of the board's cash receipts for fiscal years 21, 22, and 23 up to July 31st did not disclose instances of the board collecting a renewal fee, but there's still a conflict.
So are you saying that the statute and the rule are in conflict there, but whether or not any renewal fees were ever collected could not be determined, or you know that no renewal fees had been collected?
A statute and a statute are in conflict. And we did review the cash receipts for fiscal years 21 and 22 and up to July 31st of 2023, and we didn't see where this fee had been collected.
Okay. Well, I'd say that's not on them. That's on us. But I'm sorry. Yeah.
So have they offered anything as far as the rectification? How do they feel that they should, since they're the one, this is where the rubber meets the road. They've got to deal with this. They work with this every day, and so it's hard to work with something that's a conflict.
The board's response is that they will remove the renewal fee for instructors at the September 11, 2023 meeting. And there are published rule amendments that will include the repeal of this renewal fee in the final adoption, and they said it would be resolved in the month of September. And they've already had that.
And the statute is something that we're going to have to deal with.
So I only have the summary.
They got a lot of issues here.
Okay. Number 10, Act 2023-490 that was effective July 1st, 2023, amended the Code of Alabama, Section 344314 to remove and reduce fee amounts the board could charge for licensure. The board's emergency rules filed with LSA on July 2nd, 2023, and the proposed rule change filed with LSA on July 20, 2023 are not in compliance with the amended fee amounts. While Code Section 344314B allows the board to charge necessary administrative fees to recoup costs of performing certain services, the board should not adopt administrative rules to charge fees not authorized by statute. The board's rules include the following fees that are not authorized by statute: a license verification fee of $10, an administrative fee for the establishment reinspection of $100, and an administrative fee for the waiver of the new establishment licensure fee of $50. Additionally, the proposed administrative rules will assess the following fees in an amount exceeding the maximum amount set in Act 2023-490. A late renewal fee of $50 when the maximum that was set in the Act was $25, and an expired license reactivation fee of $100 when the maximum amount that was set is $75.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm confused because some of the same administrators are over different boards and agencies, and I'm just wondering how we get the same complaints coming up, the carryover of contracts, the violation of the law, and I don't understand it. I think that's part, and I know the person that's there, I know that, I'm sure they're doing a good job, but I don't understand why or how these conflicts that keep coming up with the same thing. I mean, knowledge is transferable. So I'm hoping that they can address this.
Understand, and this is probably more of a legal or procedural question, but when those rules are submitted, and I truthfully don't know the answer to this, but do all of those proposed rule changes go through legislative council? I think I may have asked that before. I just don't remember. All right. Do you know if these proposed rule changes went through legislative?
I don't think legislative council has taken up any rule changes in the past.
Oh.
Okay.
But
So it's not, okay, so it's not all rule changes come, it's just if there's an objection, then that will be on the agenda. Okay, all right.
So is it that these people who serve on the board, well, but certainly the administrator of it, who has all these other different accounts, has gone through and they understand it. Is it that the board members don't understand the process of making changes, or they just feel that they can just make changes? And do they not know about the legislative council? You know, it'd be best to submit whether you have to go through it or not. At least you'll know. Somebody explain to me. I'm confused here.
Well, I would say my concern is, and I'll just go ahead and lay it on the table. My concern is that if there was an act, whatever the reference number is, and they're setting fees, and if there is a proposed rule change, I'm not throwing, I don't know who lawyers are, but you would have thought that would have been caught from the legal side too. Here's what your statute says. And if there's a proposed rule change, is it in direct conflict with what the statute says? Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Significant issue 2023-11. The board is not in compliance with its complaint handling procedures regarding the execution of consent agreement. A review of the board's minutes and 108 executed consent agreements during the sunset review rollover period disclosed the following discrepancies. 108 consent agreements were executed prior to being presented to the board for approval. 99 consent agreements contained fines that were paid and deposited into the board state treasury fund prior to the consent agreement being presented for board approval. The board's complaint handling process displayed on their website states that the following occurs once an investigation is complete. The investigative committee reviews the complaint and agrees to the appropriate recommendation. The investigative committee's recommendations are reviewed by the board at a regular meeting. The board votes to accept the recommendation or can vote for a different disposition, and the complainant is notified of the disposition. Code section 344315A mandates complaints received by the board are referred to the investigative committee consisting of a board member, the executive director, board attorney, and a board investigator. Only when no probable cause is found can the investigative committee unilaterally act upon a complaint without board approval by dismissing the charges or preparing a written statement for the reasons for the decision. Significant issue 2023-12. The board allowed a licensee to renew a massage therapist license prior to fulfilling the requirements mandated in the consent agreement. The consent agreement mandated the licensee meet the following requirements: pay an administrative fine of $1,000 due by April 21st, 2022, attend and provide proof of graduating a sexual boundary course by June 20th, 2022, complete a one-year probationary period. Based on the information contained in the licensee's complaint file and a review of the board's financial records, the licensee did not provide proof of graduating from a board-approved sexual boundary course or pay the $1,000 administrative fine. An email correspondence dated October 11th, 2022 between the board's legal counsel, executive director, legal assistant, investigator, and an inspector stated that if the licensee did not follow through with the consent agreement, the board would set a hearing for the original charges. A review of the board's minutes did not disclose an instance of the board conducting a hearing for the licensee's noncompliance with the consent agreement. Significant issue 2023-13. Licensed massage therapists and massage therapy establishments responding to our surveys have a negative perception of the board and how the board conducts its day-to-day operations. Requests for participations in our survey were sent to 119 massage therapists and 100 licensed massage therapy establishments. 27 licensed massage therapists and 20 licensed massage therapy establishments responded. 24 of the 27 licensed massage therapists, or 88%, and 15 of the 20 licensed massage therapy establishments, or 75%, stated that the board was the most significant issue currently facing their profession in Alabama. Reasons cited for this perception include 16 of the 27 licensed massage therapists and 9 of the 23 licensed massage therapy establishments responded that the board's laws, rules, or policies are an unnecessary restriction on their practice. 18 of the 27 licensed massage therapists and 9 of the 20 licensed massage therapy establishments responded licensees are not adequately informed of the board's positions, policies, rules, and laws. 15 of the 27 licensed massage therapists responded that the board does not respond to inquiries in a timely manner. And 15 of the 27 licensed massage therapists responded that the board does not perform licensing and renewals in a timely manner. The prior significant issue that came forward deals with board member appointments. Board members were not appointed to staggered terms as required. According to the statute, 3 board members' terms should expire September 30th, 2021, and 4 should expire September 30th, 2023. Currently, they all expire September 30th, 2023. This was unresolved. As of August 22nd, 2023, the current board members do not have staggered terms, and they are all set to expire on September 30th.
Members?
Well, it could be a plus if they're all going to expire on the 30th. I mean, you know, now you got an opportunity to reorganize. Maybe some of those people may be reappointed, but you have an opportunity there if they would do what they have to do.
Dixie, remind us, if you will, who's the appointing authority for those board members?
The governor.
For all 7, I think it is?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, members, any questions, comments, concerns?
I've been round and round with this particular board and this past session anyway, and it's taken, I think, years off both of our lives. But I do think that we came together in a room one time, was a table about like this, but down in LSA with everybody, some people off of their board, Mr. Warren, Othney, some people that were disgruntled at the same time, some people in the Senate, and came up with a game plan. If there's issues with this particular board, and we said, let's go through these, and we went through all of it. We got everything kind of hashed out except for 3 major issues. In the end, we split one of the issues. Mr. Warren won one of those issues, and then the disgruntled people won one also. We also had the human trafficking department from the AG's office was in there with us. And in the time we walked out, not everyone was happy, but everyone agreed to it. Then after that, I think we went down a path of trying to change the bill before we had the substitute finalized out on the floor, then trying to change it again. I think just going through here, and I was just marking these as you were going through them, Dixie, is that a lot of this is board education. You can see where some of these questionnaires talking about the board members are asking for education on some of this. But I think it's very, very appropriate on one of these, and let me find it real quick, for a response, and I was just reading it last night. And I've lost it, so give me 2 seconds. But what it amounts to is the fact of the board is only as good as the executive director and us work and communicate together and as educated. There's good people on this board, Senator. There really are. I know some of them. I think that there just needs to be continued education in this particular field. And sometimes when you have an executive director doing most of the work, and then especially going against some of the constitutional things and the law that we passed last year, all the way from, has only been since we had that meeting approximately at the end of March until now. So, you know, we're looking at 6 months. I think there's some issues there. So I'd like to address most of those tomorrow, if that's okay, but I'm gonna go ahead and state that I'd like to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, questions, comments, concerns? All right, moving along, on-site wastewater board. Dixie, all yours.
Okay, the on-site wastewater board was created by Act Number 1999-571. They examine, license, and regulate persons engaged in the manufacture, installation, or servicing of on-site sewage systems in Alabama. The board is comprised of 9 members. 3 are appointed by the governor, 3 by the lieutenant governor, and 3 by the Speaker of the House. The administrator of this board is Melissa Hines. She's the executive director. She's appointed by the board, and her salary is set at $85,087.20. The board has 4 employees. Their legal counsel is Neva Conway. They have an interagency agreement with the Alabama Real Estate Appraisers Board, and the board compensates the Real Estate Appraisers Board a flat fee of $8,000 a year for legal services. The funds are housed in a state treasury, and they have a required distribution of any unspent funds or unencumbered funds at the end of each fiscal year that exceed 25% of the board's budget for the previous fiscal year shall be transferred to the state general fund. They did not have to make any of those transfers for fiscal years 19 through 22. Their licensee totals for fiscal year 22, they total 2,050 licenses. They do have to take some exams. Those examination results for 2022 are included on page 7. Those are given at the board's offices. And they had some findings come forward and one significant issue come forward. Finding 2021-003 came forward. It stated that the board did not convene an organizational meeting within 30 days after the October 2019 annual appointments. The meeting was held in January 2020. The code states that within 30 days after annual appointment of new members, the board shall meet for the purpose of organizing, electing new officers, and transacting such business as deemed necessary. This organizational meeting shall not be considered a regular quarterly meeting of the board. This is unresolved. The board did not convene an organizational meeting within 30 days after the October 22 annual appointments for the purpose of organizing, electing new officers, and transacting such business as necessary. The meeting that they did hold in October was a regular quarterly meeting of the board. Prior finding 2021-005 dealt with notification of the Secretary of State of vacancies on the board. This is unresolved. The board did not notify the Secretary of State of vacancies occurring due to the expiration of terms for 5 members at least 45 days before the vacancies occurred. I will say it was 43 days. Prior significant issue 2022-002, the composition of the board does not meet the diversity requirements of Code Section 3421A3. 7 of the 8 current board members are from East or Central Alabama, and there is no racial representation. The code states that the membership of the board shall be inclusive, and the appointing authority shall consider the racial and geographical diversity of the state in making their appointments. This is unresolved. The board's membership includes 7 white males and 2 white females. The board does not have representation from Southwest Alabama, but has 5 representatives from Central Alabama, 2 representatives from East Central Alabama, and 2 representatives from Northeast Alabama.
All right, members? Questions, comments?
Well, I had one phone call that said that this is a duplicate board, that the general contractors, it's causing some general contractors to have 2 different licenses, and their general contracting license should deem them able to do on-site wastewater. Person that called me said they had built them in the past, but anyway, so this is one of those that I would like to consider and ask them what differentiates them from the general contracting board.
Good question. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, is this the last one, Dixie?
It is the last one.
Security Regulatory Board.
Okay, the Security Regulatory Board was established by Act Number 2009-640 to enforce all the provisions of the law relating certifying and licensing security officers. This board has 5 members, 2 appointed by the governor, 1 appointed by the lieutenant governor, 1 appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 1 appointed by the Attorney General from the Sheriff's Association. There is a consumer member required, and there's 1 serving. There are no minority members serving, and there are no geographical requirements. This board is compensated actual expenses incurred and $300 a day for a maximum of 12 days a year. At the time we wrote this report, the board had an administrative services contract with Smith Warren Management Services, and it was for the total contract amount for fiscal year 22 that was paid was $349,000. $349,387.50. That contract expired on July 31st, 2023. Then they entered into an emergency contract that was approved until December 31st, or until the governor fully executed a new contract. And the board was currently paying $30,318.75 a month for administrative services. That was the emergency contract in place when we wrote the report. A new contract came through contract review last month for $510,000 a year and $42,500 a month. They went through the RFP process, and that was the result. They have two retired state employees. Their legal counsel, it's like on-site. They have an interagency agreement with the Alabama Real Estate Appraisers Board for Neva Conway to provide legal services. This board, though, however, compensates the Real Estate Appraisers Board for 1/3 of Neva Conway's salary, and in fiscal year 2022, that was $45,499.87. The board operates out of the state treasury. There are no restrictions or required distributions. Unused funds are retained at fiscal year end. Active licensees as of July 23rd, 2023 were 13,965. We had one new significant issue. It is regarding payments made for management services at the beginning of a month before services were fully rendered. That was for 11 of the 12 payments made. This is a violation of the Constitution as well as the fiscal policies and procedures.
Same issue that we've seen others being corrected now, though.
Right,
correct?
right.
Okay.
And that's all that we have on this one. All the other prior findings and significant issues were resolved.
Members?
The other thing I know is 4 out of 6 of the members on the board has expired. We've talked about this before, and we understand that the governor makes the appointment because they were confirmed by the Senate. But, and I think we've asked once before, maybe a couple of years ago, or at least a year ago, that we try to maybe communicate with the governor's office, and I'm just wondering if it is appropriate to have someone from her office to come and talk with us, because I don't know if anybody's here from the governor's office or if they come. And some of these things as far as board or recycling people, putting new people on, it's not the board's fault, it's not the agency's fault. But it does hamper people's ability to do business, to issue licenses. And this committee, we're going through the same thing over again. I just kind of like to find out if we are working together, or if the governor's office is working together with us as we try to move the process forward to keep the state running, because that's what this is about, keeping the state running and the state's revenues. So I really would like to have someone come talk with us and explain, and if there's any way that we can help, but maybe we could do something. I don't know. Maybe the legislature could do more. But we just need to, I need to better understand hold up, and I know this is not the only thing that they have to do across the street.
Senator Gudger.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I agree with you, Senator. I think that's a smart move for us to get together and communicate with the governor's office. Second, Mr. Chairman, after our last committee meeting, I got a phone call from someone that was in the cosmetology world, and of all people, Linda Coleman Madison had repeated one of the complaints that one of the people that are licensees had. And that particular person, I didn't even know that I knew them, but I ended up knowing their son very well, and said the complaint has been there for 2 years. We were told that it was completed, and that was handled, and we could get online and find that information now. It sounds like that complaint has not been handled, and you can't get online and find that. If I'm confirmed that, I know it's kind of late in the day, but I was just getting some text from it right now. I would like to call, if that's possible, somebody from cosmetology back up tomorrow for the meeting, just to talk to them about that one issue, if that's possible, Mr. Chairman.
Well, given the late date, I'm not telling you it's not possible. I don't want to hold them to that standard at this point, but certainly I would suggest that you could reach out to them, ask them about that, relay that information back to us, and should they desire to come, then we've got a full day tomorrow, but we could give them a couple of minutes to address your concerns.
And if it's handled, I'll make sure I'll say that to everyone tomorrow also, but I appreciate you allowing me to give me that leeway.
Yes, sir. I want to point out too, before we adjourn, I didn't mention this, but each of you should have gotten the 22-23 legislative report from the Alabama Securities Commission, and that was well done and laid out. And I just urge you to look through there and familiarize yourself with that. And thank you to the Securities Commission for doing that and getting that to us. Anybody else have any comments?
On behalf of Dixie's birthday, I ask that we can adjourn so she can go celebrate.
I was hoping you weren't going to see.
You can leave your stuff here.
Got a motion for Senator Gudger to sing happy birthday tomorrow. All in favor? We're adjourned.